Olá, muito boa tarde. Bem-vindos novamente aqui ao grande auditório do Iscte para a segunda parte da conferência.
Hello and welcome to this room at Iscte for the second half of this conference on social impact, people at the heart of cultural organizations. In the afternoon, we'll have our keynote speaker, Sonia Blasco, on the social barometer of the museums in Catalonia, and then we'll be talking about the assessment and impact on studies and perspectives and practices and expectations. There will then be a summary of this conference, and after that we'll have the closing and the launch of cultural development published by the OECD. So I'd like to welcome Sonia Blasco, the Director of Museums in the Service of the Generalitat of Catalonia, and Bruno Eiras, Deputy Director General for Books, Archives and Libraries, who moderate. Thank you.
Boa tarde. Hablaré en castellano. Os pido disculpas porque
I'll be speaking Spanish. I apologize. I sort of kept up to the Portuguese, but my Portuguese is not good enough to speak. I work in the Department of Culture of the Generalitat. I'm the coordinator of the Museum Service, and I will talk about our project. Firstly, I would like to thank the invitation for being here. I'm very happy. It's always a pleasure to share with colleagues and people in the world of culture, to share our concerns and see the path forward. But I was lucky enough to see the presentation of your project, and I think it's very interesting, and I liked it a lot. Thank you so much for having us here, and thank you for being here in person or online. I see a lot of people are representing culture. I know it's after lunch, we're all tired, and the digestion is kicking in. Like I said, I'll talk about the social barometer of museums, but let me talk about the context. I don't know how it happens here in Portugal, but in Catalonia, over the past few years, in the world of culture in general, and especially museums, we've had a lot of events. Some had to do with the pandemic, but not just the pandemic, because I thought some things were building up and others just exploded with the pandemic. All of us involved in culture feel affected. While we were all locked up, musicians started playing music and composing, book sales went through the roof, people started watching theater at home, and people became aware that culture was important, that we needed it. This helped us develop some topics to do with health, how museums and culture can help increase people's well-being, and several other topics. For those who don't know what happens in Catalonia, doesn't know about museums, we have 120 accredited museums. At lunch we talked about the separation between accredited museums and museum collections. Museum collections are open to the public, but they don't meet a number of requisites. We have 120 registered museums and about 600 collections open to the public. We have large museums, the Museo Nacional de Arte de Catalonia. Most are average size, medium sized, with few staff and few economic resources.
un 85%
About
son
85%
museos públicos,
will be
dependen de la
public
administración
museums,
pública y la mayoría
dependent on
dependen de los
public administration,
municipios,
and most
de los
depend
ayuntamientos.
on the municipalities.
Son unas plantillas pequeñas y de gente muy motivada. Hablándolo
They,
también en la
they have
comida, me parece que
small
es algo que
buildings and
compartimos.
highly
Nosotros
motivated
trabajamos en la
people, and I
cultura,
think
no lo
this is
hacemos
something common to
habitualmente por
Portugal.
dinero, lo hacemos porque nos
People who are
apasiona.
in
Y
the
ahí
business of
nos
culture
damos todo. Allí
are
pasa lo
passionate
mismo.
people and not
Pero
in
es
it for the
cierto que
money.
tienen estructuras pequeñas y pocos recursos. Hay,
Again,
a pesar de eso, hay dos
small
cosas que
structures,
Cataluña
few
nos está
resources,
ayudando muchísimo.
but some things are very helpful in Catalonia.
Es
One
que
of them
tenemos, en realidad funcionamos como un gran equipo.
that we
Tenemos
work
dos
as a
tipos de
team.
redes, unas redes
We
territoriales,
have two
y
sorts
unas
of
redes,
networks, territorial
temáticas,
networks and thematic
tienen unas
networks.
coordinaciones
And
y a
these
nivel de
networks
instituciones
are
estamos muy bien
coordinated.
coordinados. En estas redes pueden participar
They're very well
museos públicos,
coordinated. These
privados,
networks can
de
include
instituciones
private
que
and
no
public
tienen nada que ver
museums,
con la Generalitat, nos da lo mismo.
bodies that have
Trabajamos
nothing to
en
do with
plan
Generalitat. We all work
en un esquema horizontal
on a level playing
y
field,
compartimos muchas cosas.
on a
Esto quiere
horizontal
decir que cuando tenemos que desarrollar
flow
algún
chart.
proyecto, para nosotros,
So
gracias a
when
tener
we
estas
have
redes, nos
project,
es muy
whenever
fácil
there's
y
a
muy
project,
rápido ponernos
these
en
networks
contacto, hablar
make it easier for us to come into contact, to
las
talk,
dificultades que tienen.
and to progress.
Pero tenemos este esquema muy bien montado y esto nos ayuda. Y la otra
Okay,
cosa
this
que
is
tenemos
helpful
muy buena
for
es
us,
un plan
and
estratégico.
something else that
Tenemos un plan
works in our
estratégico,
favor
como
is a
no podía
strategic
ser de
plan.
otra manera, con lo que os estoy explicando,
We have a strategic
lo
plan
construimos entre
that
todos.
was
Es
built
verdad que se impulsó
by
desde la
all of
Generalitat,
us. Of course,
desde el
the
Departamento
main
de
driver
Cultura,
was
se hizo
Generalitat,
con
the
alguna consultora externa,
culture department,
pero dirigido desde el departamento y con la colaboración de todo el
and
sector.
all the
Eso a
actors
nosotros a nivel político
cooperated.
nos blinda mucho. Quiere decir
This is
que
very helpful to
este
us.
proyecto además
This means that
lo
this
tiramos
project
adelante entre todos. Que
is
cuando
moving
un museo
forward
nacional
and is
decide
being
hacer su propio
moved
plan
forward by
estratégico,
everyone. Whenever a
mira,
municipal
de acuerdo
museum
con el plan global
wants to
que
draft a
tenemos,
strategic plan, museums will be
y los dando la espalda,
very strictly
estarán
involved
fuertemente implicados
in the
en la
cultural,
vida cultural,
educational,
educativa,
social and scientific life of this country.
Los museos estarán bien
The
valorados
museums
por amplias capas de la sociedad, que los considerarán relevantes
will be considered relevant and necessary by society at large. In fact, this already happens. When we did the diagnosis survey, this is something that stood out.
Con lo que se ha ido hablando esta mañana y para nosotros es básico, porque aparte de preservar
This
el
is
patrimonio
linked
y
to
la
something
memoria
that
del país,
that was
decimos
said
que
this
los
morning,
museos abordarán los grandes
as well
retos
as
sociales,
preserve heritage
culturales y
and
medioambientales,
memory.
y actuarán
The
como
museums
espacios
must go
de
into
educación,
the
de
main
participación y de
challenges,
debate,
environmental
comprometidos por hacer
and
una
cultural
sociedad y un
and
mundo
social,
mejor. Es verdad que los museos no
in
pueden
striving
cambiar el mundo
to
a
have
brújula,
a better
pero
world.
sí que
Of course,
podemos,
museums can't
estoy
change the
convencida de ello,
world,
porque lo veo cada día, podemos hacer mejor
but
el entorno, el
we
mundo que se mueve, la
can do
comunidad que
better.
se
We
mueve,
can
que hay
have a
alrededor
good
de cada uno de
impact
nuestros
in the
edificios.
community we engage
Y
with.
por eso trabajamos. Para esto, nuestro plan estratégico
To that end,
lleva siete
our
objetivos.
strategic plan
No
has
los voy a
7
leer todos, lo tenéis en la
strategic
presentación.
goals. You can see them
Quería
up in
señalar el que
on the
tenemos
screen,
en negrita, que es
but
incrementar la
I'd like
capacidad
to highlight the
comunicativa en el
point
museo
6,
y estimular su
increasing
potencial
the
para
communication
proveer contenidos y
communication
experiencias de
abilities
calidad.
of the museum and
¿Y por qué quería
foster its
destacar
potential
Pues
to
porque
promote
el barómetro
content,
social de los
quality
museos, que es el
content and
proyecto que os he
experiences.
explicado,
Why?
se enmarca dentro de
Because
este objetivo de comunicación.
The barometer
Cuando hicimos una
is
diagnosis
framed
previa,
within this communication.
Antes de elaborar el plan estratégico, hicimos una
Before
diagnosis
we
para
came
ver
up with a strategic
cómo
plan,
estaba todo, ¿no?
we
A partir de
carried
qué
out
punto
diagnosis,
partíamos, detectamos que los museos tenían
and
poca
we
fuerza
realized
comunicativa.
that
Es verdad que
museums
hacíamos
didn't
muchas
communicate
cosas,
too
pero
well.
no
We
las
did a
debíamos
lot of
explicar
things,
bien.
but we
Los
didn't
museos
communicate them.
catalanes, sobre todo, salen en los medios de comunicación
Catalan
cuando
museums
a final de
are
año se
only
dice
in
cuántos
the
visitantes
news
ha habido,
at the end of
o
each
cuando
year
se
when
habla
they
de alguna
quote the number
gran
of visitors
exposición,
or
¿no? De
whenever
alguna
there's a major
exposición
exhibit,
de las que llamamos blockbuster.
like a
Pero
blockbuster
existen
exhibit.
muchos otros
But
proyectos que no
there
tienen
are
visibilidad.
many
Por
projects
tanto,
that lack the
decidimos
publicity.
hacer un
And that's
elemento,
why we
construir
decided
un instrumento,
to
que es el
build
barómetro social de
an
los
instrument,
museos,
the
que
social
tenía como
barometer for
objetivo
museums,
principal visibilizar
whose
la
main
función
goal
que desarrollan los museos
was
para
to
incrementar su relevancia en la sociedad.
assess what
Como os decía,
museums
nuestros
could do in
museos
order to
tienen una
increase
cultura
their
que tiene pocos
relevance.
recursos, una plantilla
we are
también más
short-staffed,
pequeña de lo que se necesitaría. Nosotros queremos mostrar a los
but we
titulares
want
de
to
esos
show
museos que la función que hacen esos museos es importante, es
the powers
relevante
that
para
be
su comunidad.
in the museums
Para
that
nosotros,
they can
el
have
barómetro
a relevant
social
role
es
to
un instrumento de
society.
advocacy que también ha salido
This
esta
is an
mañana.
advocacy instrument,
Cuando se
tool.
comenzó a construir,
When we
éramos
when
muy
we started
ambiciosos.
building
Trabajábamos
this,
con
we
estos
were very
6
ambitious,
ámbitos
and
de
we had
impacto. Queríamos
these 6
evaluar
impact. We wanted to
cómo
assess
los museos iban ampliando la
how
participación,
they could
trabajaban por preservar el patrimonio,
increase
ayudaban a
participation,
reforzar el
preserving
capital social,
heritage,
aumentaban el
strengthening social
conocimiento,
capital,
servían
increase
a la
knowledge,
educación y ayudaban a avanzar
serve
hacia ese
to
cambio
educate
social.
and
¿Y cómo pensábamos hacerlo?
drive social change.
Bueno, pues primero
How did we intend to bring
detectando,
this
analizando y
forward?
estudiando
We want to
qué es lo que
detect,
estaban
analyze, and
haciendo
study
los museos
what
catalanes en
Catalan
relación a esto.
museums
Y
did
después,
when it came
dando
to
a
these
conocer
topics.
este impacto, es decir,
And then
teníamos datos y después
wanted to
explicaríamos
collect data
en
and
qué
explain
contribuyen los museos a la sociedad, qué hacen
how
para
museums
resolver,
contribute
para
to
ayudar a
society,
resolver los
what
problemas y los
they
retos
could do in
sociales,
order to
qué
help
es lo que estaban
solve
ayudando a cambiar,
social
qué hacían.
problems and
Entonces,
challenges
empezamos a
in
construir,
communities
pues,
in the
nuestra
country,
herramienta,
and
igual que vosotros, ¿no? Habéis hecho.
how are they helping
En el
fostering
2018
change? What
se
positive
elaboró, se acabó de
impact are they
elaborar una
having?
propuesta de
In
modelo.
2018, they
Yo
drafted
voy a pasar muy
a,
por encima de estos
a
modelos
draft
porque
model.
me interesa
I'm
sobre
going
todo
to skim through
explicaros
this
cuál ha
because
sido la evolución.
what I want to
Pero
do
esta
is talk about the
documentación, que
evolution.
es
But
muy
all
valiosa,
these
de verdad
documents,
os lo digo,
these are
lo
precious
leéis, a quien le interese
documents,
el tema, encontréis los links en la
and
presentación.
you can find the
¿vale?
links
Que podréis
in this
consultar.
presentation,
Entonces,
which I will make
elaboramos un
available to you.
modelo que nos lo hizo una
We came up
consultora
with a
que se
model
llama Margarida Llorán, es una
drafted
gran
by a
consultora
consultant, Margarida
para este tipo
Llorán.
de temas, también nos ayudó con el plan-
She's
con el
a
plan
well-known
de
consultant.
Entonces, se contemplaba un análisis
We
cuantitativo y
want
un análisis cualitativo.
a
También ha salido.
quantitative and a qualitative analysis, like we spoke.
Salieron unos
of this morning.
130 indicadores.
We came up with
aproximadamente.
130
En el 2019 lo que
indicators.
hicimos
In
fue
2019,
contrastar este
what we
modelo
did was
teórico, que también bebía
compare
muchas
this
bases
theoretical model
internacionales, como habéis hecho vosotros, ese modelo
with a lot
lo
of
contrastamos
international
con
information, and
un
we
grupo piloto de 6 museos, sin ponerlo en
matched
marcha, sencillamente,
this
bueno, un poco
draft
habéis
with
hecho
a
vosotros
pilot
también,
group of
con
6
34
museums.
instituciones, creo. Nosotros
You
cogimos
did the
6
same
museos y fuimos
with
trabajando
4
con los
institutions,
distintos
and we used
A
6
partir de aquí nos
and
quedamos
tried
con
to establish the
114
practices.
indicadores. Aún eran
From that on,
Perdón,
we
perdón.
came up
Teníamos
with
114 al principio,
I'm
y
sorry,
con este
let me
grupo
correct
de
myself,
trabajo
says the
nos
speaker.
quedamos
We
en
had
35.
initially
Nos quedamos en
114
museos.
indicators,
Todo esto,
and then we whittled them
escoger
down to
aquello que
35.
efectivamente creéis, no solamente que es valioso, sino que también
And this has to do
está
with
equilibrado
things
en
that
relación al esfuerzo que supone. Y pasamos a
what
35
is
indicadores.
valuable
Esos 35
and what
indicadores
can
son
be
los que
justified.
recogió el Observatorio
We
de Público
ended up with
del Patrimonio
35
Cultural
indicators
para hacer un análisis, o sea, un test. ¿Vale?
and
Hicimos
decided
un
to
test
carry
en el
out
cual
a test
participaron 12 museos. En este caso sí que los
with
12
12
museos
museums. And these
probaron,
12 museums
recogieron estos 35 indicadores, hicieron el
took
barómetro social, lo aplicaron. ¿vale?
these 35 indicators and applied them.
Bueno, a nivel de tipos de indicadores, he pensado que igual también os interesaba saber. Eran
In terms
en la
of
línea de lo que estáis
indicators,
trabajando vosotros, ¿eh?
They were
A
similar
nivel de
to some
participación,
things that
nos
we were working
interesaba
on in
medir
terms of
cómo se
participation.
incrementaba el número de visitantes, hasta qué punto se incrementaba la
We
posibilidad
wanted
de
to
que
see how to
viniera
increase the number of
personas
visitors,
de manera gratuita,
how
a nivel
to
de
increase the number of
preservar el patrimonio,
free
cuántas piezas
visitors who didn't have
se
to
habían
pay,
incorporado a la colección,
how many pieces had
si eran
been brought
consultables
into the
online o no, cómo se iba
collection, if
incrementando
you
esa
could
manera de consultarles, esa posibilidad de
check
consulta.
all of this
¿Qué otros
online,
espacios patrimoniales gestionaban los museos? Porque no sé aquí, pero allí muchos
and whether or
museos,
not
aparte de
museums
tener
manage other
cuidado de
heritage
cuidar
cultural
las
spaces.
colecciones, también
Because museums
se
have a lot of
ocupan de
quality,
espacios
but
patrimoniales,
they also
municipios,
manage
monasterio, espacios patrimoniales. Esa también es una
convents, monasteries,
Bueno, son
etc.
indicadores un poco en la línea de los que habéis planteado vosotros.
These indicators are in line with
¿Cuáles son
what
nuestras conclusiones?
you displayed here this morning in Portugal.
Nuestras
What
conclusiones,
were the conclusions of this
por
pilot
un lado,
project?
que teníamos que sorprender.
On the one hand, we
Quiero
decided that we
decir,
needed
si
to
nosotros
surprise
lo que queremos
people.
es usar este barómetro
If we want to
como
use this
advocacy para
barometer
mostrar todo
as
aquello que
advocacy
hacen los
to
museos,
showcase everything the
no
museums
tenemos
are
que
doing,
hacer especial hincapié en aquello que la gente ya sabe que los museos
let's
hacen.
not not stick to what people already know the museums are doing, conserving art pieces, etc. No, let's think outside the box. Let's draw people's attention. And so we needed to readjust the scope of the analysis. Second element, we needed to make quantitative indicators easier. We ended with 35, but to get there we'd have to ask 47 questions, because an indicator is not just one question, maybe it's 2 or 3. And so we had 47 questions. And these museums were highly motivated, were the most motivated ones, but they still said that this was too much effort. We had therefore to make this simpler. We had to make things easier. I don't know how it is in Portugal, but often in Spain, in Catalonia, they have to transmit data to the municipality, etc., and other bodies. But we wanted them not to have to duplicate their efforts, because if they're short-staffed, let's not increase their stress levels. And something else that was said this morning, we had to boost the qualitative aspects. Our pilot project only included quantitative indicators. Once we had all the data, and then when we were tasked with explaining the results, it was very hard to take this to do some advocacy with quantitative data, because data needs to be contextualized. You need to see the evolution over time, and then you have to frame it, because otherwise, if you don't know the context, then data will give you very little information. We also noticed that there were several projects of interest in the museums, and we wanted to promote them, but the quantitative data were insufficient to see the variations. Therefore, what we did was reformulate the project. Once you've done something, you want to finish it as soon as possible. But it was clear that we needed to fine-tune some things, and therefore we took a year to reset everything. I loved Margarita's model, but I could have talked about this model, but we were past that. I could have talked about the data, but if I didn't give you the context, they would be empty data. I'm going to talk about the point we're at, the beta stage. This is where we're at. There's a consensus that we need to stop increasing this, but this is what we think we need to do. Like I said, the pandemic brought some changes, but we're going to focus on 5 things: participation and community. We want to have these questions answered. How do museums contribute to develop their community? Do they help strengthen social cohesion? If so, how? Health and well-being. I can't go into this in detail, but there's a lot going on in Catalonia. You'd have to see them. The question we want answered is, how do museums work towards improving your health in the broadest sense? Third item, cooperation and territory. How do museums participate in developing the territory? Territories and areas keep developing, and we don't need to focus only on this, but let's not forget it, because it's also important. Education and learning.
llega la acción educativa de los
How
museos a
far
centros educativos
does the educational action of museums reach educational centers and
para
citizens?
toda la vida. ¿Cómo contribuye
How
esta acción a la mejora de la
does this
educación?
action
Porque allí también
contribute
estamos
towards
inmersos
improving
en un
the
cambio de
status of
modelo
education?
educativo. Y
The
el
educational
sector de la
models are
educación lo que
changing,
nos
and the
dice
educational sector
es que los
gives
museos
us
somos unos
the
instrumentos para
feedback that
transformar
museums
la
are
educación. Nos quieren utilizar así,
tools
estamos encantados de que así
for the
sea.
change of education. We're happy to be
Claro que
that,
sí, porque es verdad que un niño que en el aula
because it's true.
está en un rincón, llega a un museo
A kid
y
that's
se
in the corner,
transforma, no, muestra aquello que realmente es
classroom,
un espacio de libertad. Y
they'll
los
walk
museos
into
son esos
museums
espacios
and transform, because museums are a space for freedom.
Sonia, 5 minutos, por favor.
Vale. No me deja pasar. ¿Me lo podéis pasar desde allí, por favor? La siguiente diapositiva.
Can you please skip this slide?
¿No? Vale. Análisis cuantitativo.
Quantitative analysis.
En análisis cuantitativo reduciremos los indicadores, ¿vale? Pediremos
We'll
a
reduce
todos los
the
museos que
number
lo
of
hagan.
indicators.
Antes era una cosa voluntaria, pero como gobierno nos interesa ver cómo los museos
This
en
used to
general
be on a voluntary
evolucionan,
basis,
porque
but
sabemos que lo
we
están
need to
haciendo.
see the evolution of
Solamente queremos
museums, and
Por
we
tanto,
want to see and
haremos 5
improve this.
indicadores básicos de cada uno de los ámbitos.
We'll
y
select
cada 3
5
años
key
recogeremos los
indicators,
datos.
and every
No hace
3
falta
years
hacerlo
we'll
cada
collect
año,
data.
porque no cambiarán tanto, ¿vale? Todas las preguntas serán relevantes.
All
Y
questions
si ya
are
las
relevant,
tenemos, no las volveremos a preguntar.
and once asked, they won't be re-asked.
La parte cualitativa, ¿qué haremos?
As for the
Aquí sí que
qualitative
cada año haremos un
stage,
llamamiento a todos los museos
each year
para
we'll
que
call
los
upon
que quieran
museums
nos presenten proyectos
ask
que estén desarrollando
those
en
who want to
relación a
do
los 5
so
ámbitos.
can
Los
present
presentarán con
projects
una
related
ficha,
to
con un
one of the
link,
5
con una
scopes.
mínima información, porque ya buscaremos en su web de qué se trata ese proyecto. Con esto
And they can very
construiremos
briefly
un
explain a
catálogo de
project.
buenas prácticas
We
en
will
relación a los 5
use this to
ámbitos.
draft a catalog
Escogeremos
of best
cada
practices
año
for each
uno de
scope,
estos
and
proyectos
every
para
year
hacer un
one
caso
of
de
these
estudio.
projects will be made into a case study.
Estudiaremos en profundidad, porque
We'll go
queremos
deep
saber
into that,
cómo se ha desarrollado
because
ese
we
proyecto
want to
y qué
see
impacto
how these
ha
projects
tenido
develop and
en
what
su
kind of
comunidad.
impact
Es un-
they've had
un análisis de
in
caso
their
como los que
community.
hacen
This is a
las
case
escuelas de
study
negocios, tal cual.
similar to business
Estos casos
schools.
nos servirán de inspiración y nos servirán para
This,
la parte de
this will be a learning experience.
comunicación.
When it
Tendremos
comes
una
to
página
communication,
web, publicaremos
we'll have
los
a
datos
web page,
cuantitativos,
we'll
los catálogos de
publish
buenas prácticas,
quantitative
los casos de
data,
estudio
best
y todo
practices,
esto
case
lo haremos
studies.
llegar, los museos lo pueden llegar a hacer llegar a sus titulares, pero nosotros lo utilizaremos para
we
hacer llegar
will
estos casos que sí que son muy
use
comunicables
these
a los medios
cases
de comunicación, ¿vale?
and
Casos
feed them
como museos que
to
están trabajando
media.
con gente mayor,
Museums
con
work
niños,
with senior
desarrollando
citizens
proyectos,
or
son muy
children and have
vendibles, los
special
vamos a vender,
projects.
para que la sociedad sepa
They
qué
are
es lo que
highly
estamos haciendo.
marketable.
Y trabajaremos, por favor, trabajaremos con unos consejos de
And
seguimiento.
we will
Uno
work
científico, en el sentido
with
de que serán las
a
personas
scientific council.
especializadas en temas
We
de
want people
educación,
who are
o en temas de
special,
salud, o en
specialists
temas de
in health,
sostenibilidad,
education,
los
or
que nos digan qué
sustainability.
indicadores
We
son
want them to
relevantes,
tell us
qué
which
qué criterios
are
son
the
los que
most
tenemos que
relevant
usar para
indicators,
seleccionar
which
los casos de
criteria
buenas prácticas,
should we
para hacer los
resort
casos
to
de
in
estudio.
selecting the best
Tendremos
practices and
especialistas
selecting
o en
the
salud,
case
o en
studies.
educación, o en
We'll need
sostenibilidad,
specialists
que
in
nos ayudarán a hacer
sustainability,
esta
education,
guía.
health,
Después el
and they will help us
esta
do this
el
triage.
comité de seguimiento, como os decía, que teníamos una estructura
And,
de redes
follow
temáticas y territoriales, formarán parte de este comité, porque al final funcionamos
This
como un
monitoring
sistema.
council
Necesitamos que todos estos hagan el
will be
seguimiento
part
y
as
nos ayuden a implementar.
of a system,
Y
and we'll
finalmente,
need help implementing this.
el calendario es lo más fácil. El año que viene
Finally, this is the timeline. This will be launched as of next year.
ya está, este es el resumen.
And this is it. This is the summary. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Sonia, por tu presentación.
Thank you, Sonia, for your presentation, and especially for having shared with us the real possibility that during 5 years it's possible to implement a project this size and it's also to rethink it till the 5th year. I have a lot of questions to ask you. Maybe I should take advantage of the coffee break later. But so let me just talk to you about two things. First, in your presentation, you stressed the importance of communication, of involving the community with the work that is being done. And this is something we are very much used to do. Now, assuming that it is so important, we haven't done it so much as we should. So do you think that the recognition of the role of museums, or in a broader way of the cultural organizations, it's a problem we have with the libraries as well, and we have to work more so that the community knows what it is that we are doing, and to them it should be clear that museums and cultural institutions in general are not just to be looked at, but for one to participate. What can you tell us about this? Well, regarding communities, I believe that more than communicating, what we do in the communities is a change that takes place when we develop something together with the communities, because it's the same community that is part of the project that communicates. So you don't have to make that effort. This is a challenge, for instance. A medium-sized museum, there were some commented visits for deaf people, and they did it. Instead of having someone visiting and then introducing it into sign language, they did it the other way around. They looked for people with training in history of the art that were deaf people with a background in history of the art to make this to lead these visits, and then someone would interpret to oral language. So it was quite a reversal. So in this case, they did not have to communicate to the deaf community that this service was being provided because they were part of it. They were the ones who wanted to have that. But administration, the management, has to make sure that this activity I've just explained was made visible so that the citizens know about it. Yes, we do have a few human resources, so when time comes to communicate, we don't have the time nor the money, so we are always making this extra effort. One last question. In the Conference on Cultural Organizations, and taking offense of the fact that Catalonia and Barcelona in particular have one of the best networks of public libraries, do you think we should take advantage of the example you shared with us, of the work that you have been doing for museums, and make the most of its application to public libraries, taking into consideration the La Xarxa from libraries of Barcelona? Well, to those of us who work for the museums of Barcelona or Catalonia, in general, our library network underwent a major change. It's a real plus these days. Now, the transformation, the change that happened in the libraries did not come from communication, it came from the structure. It came from no longer having to build libraries, but a staff structure, saying that we do libraries, but they have to be well resourced. And this was in the end of the 20th century, and we have to imagine how the 21st century libraries have to be, and then we'll build them. So they imagine libraries with services in addition to books. And today, our library network functions marvelously well, and people just take advantage of them because they like them. So if you're at this point now, you're like us some years ago. And this barometer will be very important. Yes, in Barcelona it sounds we have not the best library in the world. The International Federation has appointed Barcelona's library as the best in the world. Another thing that I stress from your presentation that we were not afraid to assume that culture can be evaluated, and it can be quantitatively but also qualitatively. I think that it is very important to us, and we don't have to fear doing it, and we should not downgrade culture because it lacks a quantitative dimension. And if you allow me, I will take advantage of the occasion for 2 minutes, because when we work in culture, I should have a paper here. So, as I was saying, when we work in culture, sometimes get a bit frustrated because we do this with a lot of passion, but then so much work. I just wanted to remind you a few words. It is that when, in the beginning of the war in Ukraine, to raise morale and to show that our work makes a lot of sense, when the war started in Ukraine, a Ukrainian writer was interviewed, and the journalist asked him if he thought that in the middle of the war, culture had a role to play. And I'm going to read his answer to you, and I will finish here. So the writer answered the journalist, the need for culture continues in Ukraine. My friends and I, we have founded a cultural association in an underground space. From the beginning of the invasion till today, there is always an event every hour, concerts, poetry, readings, classes. People need to come together for culture. Before the war, there were 2 or 3 events per week. Now we have 5 or 6 per day. I mean, it's a fight of primal instincts, fight of the war against death, against hatred, against meaninglessness. And this is part of our cultural identity. I think that we have a major challenge ahead of us, and instruments such as the one you propose help us measure to be able to share the power of culture. Thank you. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Bruno. Now, the second talk, but before, some news. The CISOC website is already online. You may already consult it. But now the second part are these 2 talks we are going to have with the presentation of certain case studies, inspiring projects and practices. First talk, studies and perspectives. I call on stage Raquel Campos Franco, a social entrepreneur and a teacher at the Porto Business School. Hugo Seabra, project manager at the Gulbenkian Sustainable Development Project. Patricia Silva Santos, sociologist, responsible for monitoring and evaluation of activities at the National Theatre. And the moderator will be Sofia Costa Macedo, researcher at the Sociology Research Center. Yes, Pedro Cunha, Director General for Education. I'm sorry. Good afternoon. I greet the members of the panel. Thank you for accepting this invitation. I'd like to greet the audience here today, those that are following us online as well. This morning we talked about practical application of what we have been working on, impacts and measurements, and this panel will present some studies that were made on these matters. So without further ado, I give the floor to Raquel Franco. We have a challenge to our speakers. You have to stick to your 10 minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. First, I thank the organization for the invitation, for this challenge. We're very pleased to respond to Professor Camacho to share with you what was a journey around the world, about the journey around the world of Portuguese foundations. We were challenged, and by we mean the team over there. I'm representing a team. So we were challenged some time ago to do a social impact study of the Portuguese foundations from the Portuguese Foundation Center. The Portuguese Foundation Center, entity representing more than 140 foundations in Portugal. We try to understand first and then to let the society at large know about the impact of foundations. Foundations may have many objectives. We don't cover just cultural foundations, but also foundations with a social aim and with other aims that foundations have, and also with the methodological support and discomfort of Francisco Manuel dos Santos Foundation, we developed his work. Now, I know that I have this 10-minute challenge and it's counting. I will try to stick to that. And I will do it in 3 parts: relevance, methodology, and results or outcomes. Foundations, and this was our starting point. We have this data. We know that foundations have an economic impact. There is a satellite account that measures this economic impact in a limited way, but still sufficient to make this statement. The National Statistics Institute says there is 619 foundations, even though that we know they're active foundations and really working on field, it's about 400. But having this number as a reference, the National Statistics Institute says that they employ more than 14,000 workers. They pay about 300 million in wages. But the foundations are really a small universe. They are only 0.9% of the entities in the social economy. There are many associations, thousands of associations. So foundations are just a small group. But nevertheless, they bring 6% of jobs, 7% of wages, and 6% of the EB. So we know that foundations have a real economic impact on society that is higher than the number of entities in the sector. But the question is, what is the social impact of foundations exactly? In a simplified manner, we can represent existing associations in a tripartite manner. We know that there is a private sector companies, public sector, and the state, and non-profit organizations. And often it is said that this sector that foundations belong to, the so-called third sector or the non-profit organizations, they exist to offset faults in the market or in the government. And that's what foundations do. They are doing what the market cannot do because these are activities that do not generate sufficient profit to be interesting to the companies. And foundations are, just like other non-profit organizations, they are where the government is not. Sometimes they are with projects or the whole activity dedicated to minorities. And normally, governments do not care about minorities because minorities do not guarantee votes. The main question from the start here was this social impact. So let's see how
decidimos trabalhar,
did it come about to decide working? So we decided to make an exploratory research. We knew from the outset there were few foundations measuring social impact, and we had a limited time, a limited
não era ilimitado,
budget,
e
and
nós queríamos perceber
we
efetivamente
needed to understand
alguns dos impactos sociais
of the social impacts, and so inevitably we had to make case studies.
Portanto, o estudo hoje,
The study
desde
today,
finais de 2001,
since
está
the end of
disponível
2001, is
gratuitamente,
available to
conseguem
the public.
encontrá-lo no site do
You
Centro
can
Português de Fundações,
find it at the
tem
Portuguese Foundation
relatório,
Center. There is a
tem 5
report.
estudos de caso,
There
tem
is
12 histórias de
5
impacto.
case studies and 12
Portanto,
impact
outra
stories.
das
So
formas
another
de,
way
enfim, de nós
to
mostrar,
show,
explorar,
well, first to
aprendermos,
explore and learn
investigarmos e
in the
depois
research, and
mostrarmos
then
ao
show
público em
to the
geral,
public at large
foi
what we
através
did
das
was through
histórias de
these
impacto.
impact
Portanto, o
stories.
estudo revelou que as fundações
study
têm
showed
impacto
that
social
foundations have a
de uma
social
forma
impact
muito simples, sem
in
entrarmos em
general,
grandes
very
questões
simple
conceituais.
ways.
Isto significa que as
This
fundações,
means that foundations,
em algumas das suas intervenções,
in some of their
sem
interventions,
sombra de dúvidas, provocam mudança,
without that,
provocam
they
transformação
cause change,
social.
social transformation.
Como é que nós começamos?
And
Enfim,
where did you
isto,
start?
nós começamos em plena pandemia.
We started precisely during the pandemic, and there was this challenge at the time, a methodological challenge at the time when we were in lockdown. So the first thing we did, and it was very clear to us, we do not own, I mean, we don't know which foundations generate more impact. We had an idea, but we could not assume that. So we selected 34 experts. As a matter of fact, we didn't. It was like a snowball effect. We created a first group of people that we knew working for foundations, being there, studying foundations. They knew very well the foundations world. We started with those, and then they nominated other people until we completed the group of experts that could talk to us about foundations. And from those 34 experts, we selected 4 foundations to study, and then the team that approached these 12 foundations and selected the programs or projects that we wanted to get to know in depth. So in a schematic way, we show here the steps that we have taken. I will not elaborate on this, I mean facilitate the presentation, and if you want to talk to me about this, I will be very pleased to explain the different steps we have taken to reach the outputs of this project. We were able to understand that, and we were quite careful about which foundations to select in order to guarantee diversity. And this guarantee, we achieved it using different criteria. First, the type of institution. They are not all equal. We included the so-called independent foundations, foundations funded by entities from the third sector, cooperative entities, and hybrid entities like this one you can see here, these 4, they were constituted by several people or entities, different entities. Then we were able to guarantee diversity in terms of maturity of the foundations themselves. Here we have the different foundations, and Bissaia Barreto, José Almeida, do Cooperative Miranda, Serral, CIVic, Community Foundation, although not formally recognized as such, Montevideo Foundation, Agacan Foundation, Maltese Foundation, Santos Foundation, Foundation. It's interesting because this was a very simple classification, but from here, and when this was disseminated, we were in contact with the National Statistics Institute that spoke to us and told us about a similar classification that the Social Economy International Convention produced, and that we were very happy to see that, because
mais ou menos
It was more
óbvia
or
em
less,
termos
there was
de representatividade,
an
neste
obvious
caso,
match in terms of
Mas
representativeness.
avançando,
Now,
também
moving
conseguimos
forward,
diversidade
we were able to achieve
ao
diversity
nível da
at,
dimensão dos recursos,
in terms of
desde
dimension of
microfundações a
resources,
grandes
from
fundações,
micro foundations,
e também
large foundations,
conseguimos
and we were able
a
also
diversidade em
to
termos de
get
foco
diversity
e
in
de área
terms
de
of
atuação.
focus and area
Portanto,
of action.
aquilo que nós estudamos,
Therefore, what we are
eu já
studying,
fui
and
enunciando,
I
nós
have
estudamos o programa
said
das
it
AMAs da
here
Fundação
several times,
Nós
we studied the
estudamos
Aga Khan
o
program,
programa Khan Academy e o programa
the Khan
Inclui
Academy and Include or Inclusion
da
program
Fundação
of
Altice.
the Altice Foundation.
Nós
We
estudamos
studied
o
the
programa, o
program,
projeto SOS
sorry, the
Pessoa
project
Idosa da Fundação
SOS
Saia Barreto,
Elderly Person from the
o
Bisaya
projeto também
Reto
da
Foundation,
Fundação Carlos Gulbenkian,
so a project from the Gulbenkian
o projeto da
Foundation,
Casa de Acolhimento Residencial da Fundação SEBI, o
Sebi Foundation
Conscienciar de
Guest House
como devem conhecer,
or
portanto,
Foster
é
Family
colocar
House.
todo o parque
And
ao serviço da
the one for
Fundação
Serralves Foundation, it was
crianças.
put to the
Estudamos
Department of
também
Service
um
of
Poupar
Children.
está ao ganho da Fundação Dr. António
Also,
Coutinho de Miranda,
savings program
da
from
Fundação
the
Angela Almeida, o
António
programa de
Coutinho de Miranda
voluntariado,
Foundation, from the
e da
António
Fundação
Almeida
Francisco
program
Manuel dos Santos, a
saving,
Prodata,
and Francisco Forçal
da Fundação
Manuel dos Santos
António
Pro Data,
da Mota, o
Foundation
Prémio,
Manuel António Mota
e
Prize
a
Manuel da
Frota
Mota,
Solidária
and
da Fundação
and
Montepio, e
Solidarity
finalmente o programa
Fleet from
Inclusivamente,
Montevideo Foundation, and finally
que, enfim, é muito relevante também para a
a
sociedade,
relevant program
da
for
Fundação Vasco Vieira de Almeida.
from the Vasco Vieira
Com
de
base
Almeida Foundation.
nestes,
Now, based on these
nestes projetos,
projects,
o que nós fizemos?
what did you do?
Nós entramos a fundo em cada um deles,
We
fizemos entrevistas
approached
a pessoas que
each
conheciam
one of
muito bem,
them.
quer do lado
We made
das
interviews
fundações,
that
quer
knew
fora
them
das
well,
fundações e dos respectivos
inside and
programas,
outside the
e
foundations,
construímos então
and
os tais,
we were able
os
to
tais estudos de caso.
develop
Uma das coisas que
those
nós
case
percebemos,
studies. One of the
sendo
things that we
muito
have learned
importante, era como
as
apesar da
being very
diversidade, da
important, so despite diversity,
transversalidade,
transversality,
o ser fundação
and being a foundation
era ponto relevante para,
was a relevant
para todas
issue
estas,
to
estas
all
fundações.
these foundations.
O ir buscar estes casos,
Now, if we
divulgar
have
estes
chosen
casos,
these
permitiu-nos
cases and
levar a
disseminated them,
comunidade
this helped us
identidade,
cultivate this sense of identity and being a good starting point. Even the
cultivar
Portuguese
este
Foundation
senso de
Center to
identidade,
cultivate this
fundações.
identity,
As fundações são diferentes,
sense
o
of,
Pacto
sorry,
do
this sense of
Património,
identity, because
elas têm
foundations are
visão,
different.
de perenidade,
They often
perpetuidade,
have
desculpa. E, portanto, isso
vision
não traz
of
obrigatoriamente
necessarily
dados têm uma reputação grande
eternity.
para parceiros, etc. E a partir daqui,
So they try to involve their partners, and the Portuguese Foundation Centers also tries to cultivate this sense of identity. I know that I'm speaking too fast, but I'm almost finishing. So we were able to understand from here, from these cases, that in several foundations, this change is, sorry, this transformation, this impact is achieved. We made several surveys that are available in the outputs I told you about. And here are just a few illustrations. We understood that certain foundations measure social impact, but others are just about to start measuring that. One already applies an experimental method in this impact measurement. She's a Núcleo Par está ao Ganho project of the António Coutinho de Miranda Foundation, and we also understood that there is not a single method to measure social impact. We have to adapt methodologies to characteristics of each project, and this is something we find also in these foundations. Again, I can tell you about that. And something that allowed us to understand, I'm not going to get into details because my time is over, allowed us to understand that there are several conditions that may boost the generation of social impact by foundations. And so we went deep on those issues, those problems that can generate most social impact, type of process that the foundations follow to solve those problems, and the solution that was designed to solve them. So we get deep into these three axes, and the foundations to ambition having more impact should approach these problems with this type of processes and with an extended range of solutions. But that's it for the moment.
Thank you, Raquel.
Só explicar que eu sou muito mexido, portanto eu vou daqui para ali.
I tend to move around a lot, so I need to change places.
Ora, boa tarde a todos. Prazer imenso.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I thank you for inviting me,
Clara Camacho, pelo convite.
Paulo Cruz de Val and Clara Camacho.
Trago.
I'd like to thank you for inviting me.
Alguém me disse hoje que achou muito interessante o
Someone said today that they liked my title, and I was very concerned because using English words is a risk. But I bring you a narrative, a story. I have no figures,
mas na verdade é uma história de quem
but this is a story
com algumas,
of someone
sim, posso dizer com algumas certezas, mas também com muitas dúvidas.
who launched
E a forma
something
como
with a few certainties but a lot of doubts, and being part of a foundation
tem o espaço de oportunidade que temos de ir ajustando as velas à medida
can also trim the sails as
as coisas vão
the
acontecendo.
sailing progresses to fit the wind.
Como pensar, já agora, porque eu estou muito autocentrado e convenço-me que toda a
I'm
gente sabe da
very
iniciativa
self-centered, and I think
Party.
everybody knows about the party's initiative. Who here has heard about parties?
Ok, pronto, vejo que é uma
Wow.
grande maioria da sala,
I
agradeço.
see.
De qualquer
lot
forma,
of
para
you
aqueles
have.
que não sabem, a iniciativa Parties é uma iniciativa da Fundação.
For those who don't know, this is an
Focada
initiative by
em
the
algo que aqui nos
from
traz
the Carlos Gulbenkian
práticas
Foundation,
participativas,
focused on
com
participative
potencial e
artistic
diálogo de
practices
transformação.
geared
E
towards
nesse
social
sentido, eu tenho o
transformation.
privilégio desde a primeira hora, e tenho aqui
And
muitos
I've been here
companheiros
from
nesta
day one,
plateia que nos acompanharam nestas jornadas,
and a lot of
estar
people here
nesse
have
processo
been
de
with us.
desenvolvimento desta iniciativa, que tem umas premissas no que toca à questão da avaliação
The
externa,
premises
um bocadinho desafiantes, porque o nosso ponto
pose
de
some
partida
challenges.
às vezes temos a tendência para pensar que sabemos tudo.
Sometimes
e,
we
portanto,
tend to
já,
think we know
de alguma
everything,
forma condicionamos ou direcionamos as estruturas quando abrimos
and
um
when we
concurso em que o regulamento do
launch a
mesmo
call,
afunila, e dou-vos um exemplo,
and
teríamos
the-
perfeitamente ter identificado 3 públicos-alvo.
the elements of the call tends to narrow, sometimes narrows things down. We had 3 target audience in this call, but then, after talking to some people, we did the opposite.
espaço de enorme abertura, sem
We
cotas,
wanted
realmente
to
que criar
open this very wide without target audience,
candidatas,
without
ou seja, temos vários promotores que vêm
limits.
da
We have people from the social sector
assim. Portanto, a maioria
and
é da
others.
área artística,
Most people
organizações
are in the
da área
arts,
artística, mas não era obrigatório.
but
E
it
ainda
was not
também
mandatory.
as próprias linguagens artísticas
And
não estavam
the
fechadas,
artistic
podíamos ter
languages were not limited. We could have people from performance arts,
O que isto
etc.
faz com que haja projetos que nos chegam e que têm que ser,
This-
de alguma forma, avaliados, já passo a explicar, que têm por objetivo
Leads us to
impactar
assess
e, em paralelo,
projects
estão com projetos
that can
que irão,
have an impact on 1,000
definiram
people
como público-alvo
and
e,
whose
portanto,
target
temos
audience
esta
is
noção
15 people.
desta
So
mancha
there's
macro que,
different types of
creio eu,
projects.
para quem avança num sentido de um desenho, de uma estratégia de avaliação, se torna desafiante. Mas aquilo que verdadeiramente a Fundação Carlos Gulbenkian,
What this foundation
nas primeiras 3 edições,
wants-
queria era
wanted
uma
in its
avaliação
first
ou
3
foco
edition
na
was
iniciativa como um todo,
people to
na
focus
importância
on
diga,
the
e não
initiative as a whole
nos projetos um a um.
and not to
Eu não
focus
venho
on
trazer
projects,
aqui a metodologia,
individual
venho aqui
projects. I'm
trazer
not talking about the
o caminho que
methodology,
nós fomos
I'm
desenvolvendo. Vamos
talking
aí.
to you about the path.
Portanto, é uma iniciativa idealizada em 2013,
This was
da área de grant giving da Fundação Gulbenkian, já aqui
conceived in
mencionado,
2013
pela Marta. É a área social
From
da
the
Fundação
social
Gulbenkian que, de alguma
sector
forma,
of the
começa
Gulbenkian
por olhar
Foundation,
para esta área de
under the scope of
oportunidade
grant
de trabalho,
giving,
preenchendo dos tais vazios que
and this fills a void
e avançamos,
that
portanto,
Raquel
com uma
has
estratégia
talked about. We came up with a strategy
focada em conceder subsídios,
focused
mas
on
que neste caso
grant
o que traz
giving.
é como é que foi desenhado o caderno de encargos da avaliação estratégica, da avaliação externa da mesma. E tinha,
And
de alguma
I want to
forma,
talk about
esta
how we
intenção
drafted the list of
de,
specifications.
havia 3 pontos muito objetivos.
There are
melhorar,
3
replicar e
very
escalar modelos
objective
desenvolvidos, influenciar políticas
items to improve, replicate, and scale up the models, influence cultural and social policies, and attract other investors.
Não, que isto foi muito interessante para esta apresentação que aqui me
I
traz
won't have any
hoje,
more
ter
time,
visitado este
but
caderno de encargos
it
e
was very
perceber
important
que pelo
for me
menos
to
as
go
duas
back to this
últimas,
list.
a primeira tem
See that
e outras não têm.
The first one
Mas as
has
duas últimas,
success stories,
creio
others
que
not so
posso
much,
afirmar que
but
o
for the
próprio
other
Plano Nacional das
two,
Artes e o documento que hoje, felizmente, vem à luz, também tem um pedacito de Fundação Carlos Gulbenkian aí contido. E, por outro lado, hoje em dia trabalhamos lado a lado com a Fundação La Caixa.
we started working with other foundations, the Acacia Foundation, and we've attracted other investors. So the other 2 points were a success story.
Presente nestas áreas. Este era o caderno. Na altura foram consultadas 3 empresas.
This was the list. We invited 3 companies. This wasn't an open call. We talked to 3 companies and we selected Logframe to monitor the first 3 editions.
Entre nós era encontros de capacitação de promotores,
And we wanted
muito
to
decididos por nós é que sabemos
build skills in
o que é que os promotores precisam
promoters.
de capacitação.
We wanted to establish what kind of skills they needed during the pilot project.
Tínhamos relatórios
2014-2016, we had quarterly reports,
Tínhamos 2 visitas aos projetos por ano da equipa
We
de
had
avaliação
2
externa, recebíamos 2 relatórios da mesma equipa
yearly
também.
visits,
E,
2 reports,
e como já vos disse, é sempre uma abordagem muito mais
One
focada
per
na iniciativa
semester.
como um todo do que propriamente projeto a
and
projeto.
we were focused not
Na
on each
segunda
project but on
edição,
the initiative.
introduzimos
During
a
the
consulta
second
aos próprios
edition,
promotores.
we
Nós
started
na sala,
monitoring
depois
the
ter
consultants.
a oportunidade de
Some of you are here,
mas
you
começámos a
can
ouvir as
talk to
entidades
me
com as quais
afterwards
estávamos a
if
trabalhar.
I
Introduzimos um
misspeak.
conjunto
We
de
introduced a number of
introduzimos algo que
adjustments.
sentimos desde o início que
We
nos estava a
introduced
faltar,
something that
que
we
era a
were
dimensão
lacking from
da
the beginning,
avaliação da qualidade artística,
which is
que
the
é um
assessment
grande
of the
desafio.
artistic
Tem
quality.
perguntas
This is
sobre
a
ela,
major
se
challenge.
calhar só vou conseguir aflorar um
And if you have any
e
questions,
desafios
I can
que
only
conhecerem todo o
very
trabalho que a
basically
Isabel
broach the
Lucena
subject, but
tem vindo a
Isabel Lucena
desenvolver
has been
nesta-
developing a lot of
neste
work
cruzamento e alguns
this field.
Textos já publicados, meu Deus, 3 minutos, como é possível? Portanto, nesta
3
segunda
minutes, how
edição,
time flies.
passámos a trabalhar
second
muito
edition,
numa perspectiva de
we
nós
started
não sabemos tudo para as capacitações, para o trabalho
saying
com
we
os
didn't
projetos,
know
mas
everything,
apercebemos que muitas
but
vezes
we
há aquilo que
became
eu gosto de
aware
chamar os irmãos mais velhos,
that very
um
often
conjunto
we
de
have
entidades que estamos
older
a apoiar
brothers,
e que eles são os formadores dos
and
seus
these
pares
older
e nós
brothers,
estamos à
these
procura. Fora,
institutions
temos dentro
will help
algumas
train us.
dimensões em que há especialistas, porque são claramente,
And some of
já
them
têm
are
muito mais track
experts
record,
with a long track
como tal,
record.
começámos a beneficiar dessa possibilidade de
And so
trabalho
we started
interpares
benefiting
e não
from
as
this
fundações
peer
considerem
work.
que elas é que sabem aquilo que querem para a formação. Introduzimos a teoria da mudança.
We introduced the theory of change.
Mudámos-lhe o nome, porque
We
embora
later
seja uma
changed this
ferramenta que é
name.
muito útil,
This is a very useful tool, but it's very scary. Theory
Theory
of change is linked to another idea. This happened early on in the project, when the project was launched. And the application usually had amazing dreams, but we wanted the applications to focus on a pragmatic approach. We support projects for up to 3 years. Time is of the essence, but it also makes everything a bit harder because we need to introduce changes in a project that is thought up 3 years prior, and then there are necessary changes. We reduced data collection just twice a year. We increased the visits because there's this theme linked to artistic quality. And as a foundation, we received the log frame results for social sector and Isabel Lucena's reports for the artistic side of the project.
a dimensão da
Here you have some information on the artistic quality. I'll just zip through this. They mentioned François Matarazzo and Rachel Blanche.
Depois, em 19-21, fazemos mais alguns ajustes.
In 2021, we did further adjustments.
A teoria da mudança ser visitada por recomendação dos próprios projetos.
The theory of change was revisited after being implemented for a few months. This was the applicant's suggestion. And we wanted to limit what the projects were doing, but after a few months of implementation, we feel that another more fine-tuning is needed, and this is part of this model. The remaining elements are all similar. Why are we talking about walk the talk?
Realizamos. Isto é o meu tempo a acabar.
This means my time is up. But
Que exigíamos desde a primeira hora.
we thought that
Quem
from day
se
one,
candidatava à iniciativa Parties,
all
muito mais do que
applicants,
exigir a nós próprios. Ou seja,
we demanded more of the applicants than we demanded of ourselves. The Gulbenkian Foundation
fundisse a área social com a área das
wanted the social sector with the artistic sector
e a cocriação.
and co-creation to be fused together in one application, and then we had two teams assessing these applications.
Regressámos ao drawing board.
So we went back to the drawing board,
E decidimos repensar também nós,
and
não
we
por tanto por completo
decided
aquilo
to
que vinha de
remodel,
longe trás,
not
mas
throw out
repensámos
the
também
baby
nós
with the
o modelo
bathwater, but
que
we
tínhamos.
thought up
E nesse sentido,
another
desafiámos,
model.
aqui não foi um concurso, desafiámos o Hugo Cruz e a Isabel Lucena a
and we
trabalhar em
asked
conjunto,
Cruz and Isabel Lucena to
coisa
work
que
together,
já tinha acontecido antes,
something that had never happened before,
correu muito bem, ou parece-nos
but they worked
muito
together
bem. Tivemos
swimmingly.
muito feedback, e foi um processo
We
muito
got a lot of
resultado,
positive
sempre também
feedback.
de cocriação com as próprias estruturas com as
We
quais
worked
estávamos a
with
trabalhar, sempre tivemos
the
essa
structures we
preocupação,
were
creio que
working
posso
with.
dizer. Mais uma vez, irei a debate, portanto, quem está presente pode questionar, de termos sempre o feedback
And then we always try to get feedback
de quem
from
no terreno está numa
all
base
the
diária a
actors
trabalhar
in the
o projeto.
field,
E nesse
all those who
sentido,
work with these projects,
capitalizar também o facto de estarmos
and we
a trabalhar
wanted
com a
to
La
make the
Caixa,
best
em parceria
of
com a La
working
Caixa,
with
e termos
in a
esta
partnership
ligação
with La
aos projetos em
Caixa,
Espanha e
and also
reduzir a
promote these
simplificação
projects in
de
Spain.
formulários, o que também
We
foi
simplified
muito positivo.
all the bureaucratic
Ter
forms,
ao meu lado, na equipa, uma pessoa que
and
esteve
therefore
do
it was
outro lado,
very easy. It made it easier to have someone on my team who'd been on the other side and continuously asked me, what does this do? Why do you want this? This helped
e, portanto,
clear out
eu
some
trazia aqui mais
elements.
alguma informação, mas dizer que neste momento
I had
é
some
uma
more
equipa que
info,
analisa
but
de
right
forma
now let me tell you that
integrada,
it's
com
one
base
team,
em
one
modelos
integrated team
teóricos,
that
de
assesses
questão,
the
a
applications
dimensão holística,
based
contextualidade artística, todos eles balizados
models,
em
the
termos de
holistic
referências
dimension, the
académicas,
quality, art quality,
devidamente,
etc.
documentadas e
All of
documentadas.
these
Mas aquilo que
dimensions
queria dizer
are
é que,
documented.
e há também algumas publicações no site da Fundação Gulbenkian, na secção de acesso à cultura, escritas pelos próprios avaliadores, os anteriores e os
There's
atuais,
some
portanto, que vos convido a visitar.
publications
Mas o que vos queria dizer principalmente é que é
published by
privilégio
Gulbenkian,
trabalhar numa
written by
estrutura
these people, but
que
I
nos dá
need to
espaço
tell you that I'm
para
privileged to work with a structure that gives you space to pilot, validate, consult, improve,
nesse sentido,
and repeat.
nem sempre isto é possível, para nós é possível, portanto,
Not everyone can do this.
ajustar as
We
velas
can,
à medida
so
que
we'll
faz
keep
sentido
trimming the
das
sails
necessidades.
as we feel
Peço desculpa,
the
mas
wind
em
changes.
fui muito rápido
I
e
apologize to the interpreters because I was very fast. And this concludes my presentation.
Obrigada. Patrícia.
Muito boa tarde. Agradeço também o facto de estar aqui em representação do Teatro Nacional
Thank
Ana Maria II. Agradeço
I represent the National Theatre, Dona Maria II. I thank you for
trago aqui
inviting me.
também hoje. Onde é que... Não. O que vos trago aqui hoje é também um pequeno relato de percurso, um percurso um
I'm
bocadinho
here to talk
mais recente
about a route.
e de menos duração do que
This is a
ficou
shorter
partilhado
route
agora com,
and a more recent
pelo
one than
no
Hugo
programa
just
Parties.
talked about.
Na verdade, esta área de avaliação e monitorização tem 2 anos, chegou com
This
uma chegada, mas de uma
monitoring
forma
and
muito
assessment
estratégica
area is
e
2 years old.
podiam ter utilizado este recurso humano para qualquer outra função.
They could have used
Decidiram
these
fazê-lo
resources
para
for any other
o
effort.
resto que que me colocaram logo de
The
início
challenge
foi criar
before
uma
me
estratégia
was
para esta
to
área,
create a strategy,
estratégia de monitorização e avaliação, que eu pensei
a
há
monitoring
3
and
anos,
assessment
mas que não
strategy
poderia fazê-lo sem um primeiro processo de
over 3 years,
diagnóstico.
but I couldn't do this
Processo
without
que pretendia, por um lado,
diagnosis.
caracterizar, mapear aquilo que fazíamos em termos de atividades, mas também em termos de atores envolvidos,
I wanted to know
de
who was
processos,
involved,
metodologias,
actors,
de
process,
territórios,
methodology,
e por outro lado perceber o que
the
é que já
geographical
existia em termos
locations,
de
and I
dados.
needed to see what kind of data
E
we
nesse
had already.
sentido, foram 4 meses iniciais onde pude acompanhar a diversidade e a panóplia de
There were
atividades
4
que
months
fazíamos na altura, mas também
initially
poder
for me to
conhecer e
follow up on
auscultar
everything,
as várias direções
and then I
competentes
got
do
to
Internacional Dona Maria
talk
II,
about talk
porque
to the several
queríamos que esta
members of
estratégia
Teatro
não fosse
Nacional
uma
da Maria II
estratégia
because we wanted the
uma
strategy
estratégia
to
só
go
relacionada
beyond
com a área
silos.
de onde eu venho,
We
com a
wanted to
direção
go
de
beyond
mas que fosse
the
uma
directorate
estratégia
I
assumida
work
enquanto
for,
estratégia
but
de
we
toda a
wanted this
equipe
to
e
be
de todas as
a strategy
direções.
for the
Nesse
whole
sentido,
team.
foi muito importante perceber em cada direção
And therefore it was very
o que era
important to
feito, o que é que
realize
faltava fazer, quais eram as
what
perguntas
had
de
already
interesse
been
que eu
done,
poderia
what
ajudar a
needed to be
responder.
done.
Para além disso, toda a observação, todas as conversas de corredor, todos os almoços partilhados com a
There was a
equipa,
lot of
que foram
backstage
muito úteis
talk,
nesta fase,
a lot of
tal
lunches
como uma
shared with the
análise
team.
documental, lá está, com os dados que já existiam e que permitiram, eram dados muito avulsos e permitiu fazer,
There was a lot of
começar por
data,
aí, sistematizar aquilo que já existia em termos
but
de
we
percurso.
wanted
Havia
to
alguns projetos,
establish
por exemplo,
what we
no
already
feito aos
had.
juvenis, que
We
já
had
tinham alguns anos, que já tinham várias
projects geared
edições
towards
e que não havia
children
uma análise
with several
longitudinal em termos de
editions, but
até
there
de
was no assessment, no
assistência,
analysis. We didn't know how many people had taken part, how many had
acabou por nos
quit,
ajudar a perceber
how
também
many
onde é que
people were
estávamos
involved.
naquele momento.
And this helped
E
me,
depois o meu apoio
this assessment
fundamental, que
helped
é a
us
biografia,
figure out
as
how
outras
many people there
experiências
were.
nacionais e internacionais que
Then we had
conhecemos.
other biographies, bibliographies helped me get more international experience about what happens abroad.
Fiquei estagnada no diagnóstico.
I'm sorry that the slide is frozen.
Ok. O diagnóstico não me permitiu e não nos
This
permitiu
diagnosis
caracterizar todo o
allow
Teatro
us
Nacional
to
Dona Maria II, mas
go
permitiu,
into
em
detail
que
for
não,
the
encontrar
Teatro
aqui 3
Nacional,
desafios que esta
but
estratégia
allowed
pode
me to
responder.
identify
E que me parece
3
que
challenges.
fui ouvindo e
And
hoje de
from
manhã, há
what I
pouco
heard this
também, com a
morning,
experiência da Catalunha e que vou ouvindo
and after I
em
heard
vários
about
momentos,
Catalonia,
que não são
etc.,
assim tão diferentes daquilo que são
I see
os
that things
desafios também de outras organizações
don't
culturais.
differ
O
all
primeiro
that
era
much.
realmente este. Havia uma escassez muito grande de dados
There was
e
a
muito menos
shortage
havia
of
uma
data,
reflexão sobre os dados que já tínhamos.
and there
E quando
was
falo
no
dados,
reflection
havia
on
dados
the data we had.
quantitativos,
I'm
indicadores
talking about
quantitativos que muitas
quantitative
vezes são
indicators.
obrigatórios termos enquanto
We
instituição
sometimes they're mandatory because we're a public body.
E por outro lado, insuficiente conhecimento sobre aquilo que fazíamos,
On the other hand,
sobre até
we
onde podíamos chegar,
also lack
e onde é
knowledge
que chegávamos,
about
tanto
what
da
we
parte
did,
da própria
who we
instituição
reached, and how far we could go.
que é muito setorial, como
We had a
externamente não conseguimos
large
comunicar a diversidade de
But it was very hard to
atividades.
convey
Vamos muito para
the
além dos
diversity
espetáculos,
of these
os
activities. We
espetáculos
go
eram assumidos
beyond
como a nossa atividade
the
principal,
shows. The
mas
shows
tudo o
were our
resto
main,
ficava
are our
invisível
main
e era
activity, but
desvalorizado.
everything else we did
E
was left
estes
by the
dois
wayside.
desafios, na minha perspectiva, têm a ver com algo que alguém escreveu no meu bairro, numa parede do meu bairro.
And this led me to something that someone
Tem a ver no sentido
graffitied
em que todos
on a
os
wall
que
in my
estamos
neighborhood
aqui
where I
na
live.
sala,
They wrote,
sabemos
an
o
artist
quanto
can
a
turn
cultura é
anything
importante,
into
não é?
gold.
É um direito humano.
And we know culture is
Mas
very
muitas
important,
vezes
it's a
não temos
human
os
right.
recursos e a sistematização
Very
das
often
nossas
we
experiências
lack
para poder
resources, we
transmiti-lo.
cannot systematize
Então,
our
transforma tudo
experiences.
o quê? Quem está nesta transformação, quem não está nesta
All of us
transformação.
who are part of this transformation,
Este era dos grandes desafios.
we needed to
O
establish
outro
who was
era
part
esta
and who was
ideia,
not part of
muitas
the
vezes,
transformation.
que não se
Another
não é
idea
limitada à cultura, mas de andarmos
doesn't
de
stick
costas
to culture
viradas
is
e de não partilharmos
we don't share.
dificuldades, os
We
nossos
don't share
dilemas, os nossos
our hardships,
instrumentos,
our
as nossas
problems,
metodologias.
instruments,
E havia muito esse
methodologies,
sentimento
etc.
também, na equipa
And there was a
Dona
feeling
Maria II. Ao longo destes 2 anos, neste
With this
percurso muito
team.
limitado, percebi que além desta falta de diálogo e deste espaço
I
real,
realized
na
that
verdade estamos todos
there was a lack of dialogue,
uma
that's
atividade
true,
muito grande,
but we're all
mas
very
além disso
active.
havia o desconforto. Há esta perspectiva de que ou acertamos ou erramos, não há aqui um meio termo.
Sometimes we labor
E
under
muitas vezes
the
há uma
idea
grande
that
dificuldade
it's
em
either hit or
dispormos, em
miss.
dizermos o que não está a correr bem,
And
a
sometimes,
pensarmos que
halfway
não
through a
corre
project,
bem,
we
e
don't
sobretudo quando a avaliação
question
funciona
what's
numa
wrong.
perspectiva de reporta financiadores e mecenas.
And assessments are very
Há toda
often
uma ideia de que temos
just
que,
a
de
financial
alguma forma,
report to
internalizar
the
aquilo que fazemos. E com isso não vamos
to the
aprender.
patrons.
E esse,
But because we don't
era
question
outro-
the
é um
process
outro desafio.
halfway,
Ao longo
we
destes
cannot
2 anos
change it.
também, e atualizei estes 3 desafios para mais um que é para
I
mim,
updated
que é
these
esta
3
ideia
challenges
de
and then I
espaço
added
para
something
pensar
else,
naquilo que
which was
fazemos.
a
Esta ideia
space
do
to
slow
think
theatre, onde é que este slow theatre
about what we're doing,
encaixa-se
slow
numa programação
theatre.
muito vasta e intensa. Com tudo isto, estes são
Having
desafios
said
que
all that,
existiam na altura, não quer dizer que já estejam no passado, muitos deles
these
passam
were
a
our
nossa
challenges
atualidade,
then,
mas com
and some
tudo
of them
isto
are still
conseguimos
current.
encontrar aqui uma
But
finalidade
through all
desta
this, we
estratégia.
managed to
Tem
find a
4
goal to the
pilares.
strategy
Primeiro
with 4
pilar, que era
pillars.
este, o do conhecimento,
Firstly,
começar a
knowledge.
sistematizar, a conhecer, a
To
auscultar
create a system,
e produzir
monitor and
conhecimento em
produce
relação àquilo que fazemos.
knowledge
Esse conhecimento
about
permite-nos
what
também,
we do.
na nossa equipa, dar a conhecer a atividade como um todo
This allows us
e
to
de alguma
see
forma reforçar
our
a
actions as a
pertença
whole
a este teatro nacional,
and to strengthen
valorizar aquilo que
the
fazemos
spirit
para o
of
exterior,
belonging,
e também um aprofundamento
to convey what we
com
do
outras
to the
organizações,
outside.
tanto congêneres
And
como académicas,
our
científicas,
work
do
with
terceiro setor, que
academia,
também estejam interessadas
tertiary
nestas
sector,
questões.
and
Esta
others.
tonalidade de verde diferente não é inocente,
This,
na verdade.
there are hues
esta
of green
estratégia
here, and
foi
this is
pensada.
not
O conhecimento era a área e a
happenstance.
dimensão que seria mais trabalhada há 3 anos. Pertence à valorização
Belonging.
de uma forma mais tenue e o conhecimento a iniciar
Belonging
nestes 3 anos.
and
Fechar as
valuing
portas no Rossio. Estamos
and
fechados desde
the deepening.
janeiro
We have
deste
closed our
ano.
doors in
E
Rossio,
aproveitamos a ocasião para sermos um verdadeiro teatro
in
nacional.
downtown Lisbon,
E
and
desde janeiro
we have
andamos
become
pelo país,
a
damos às
national
portas
theatre.
e com cerca de 90
We
colaborações
go around the
com
country and
parceiros municipais,
we have
teatros,
90 cooperations
teatros,
with
etc.
municipalities,
E esta
theatres,
finalidade e esta
etc.
importância dada a cada uma destas dimensões
and the
varia
relevance
hoje um pouco.
each of
O
these
conhecimento
dimensions have
está
changes.
no topo da agenda.
Knowledge is still
A
top of the
valorização
agenda.
precisou de ganhar um novo fogo.
Valuation
Estamos
needed
fora de
some
casa,
new breath.
a equipa está por todo o lado,
We are out.
temos
We
imensas
are
parcerias.
outside,
Precisávamos de dar a
not at
conhecer de
home.
outra
We have
maneira
new
também
partnerships.
aquilo que estamos a
We
fazer.
wanted to make
E
people
esta área
aware
de
of what
monitorização
we're
e
doing,
avaliação ganhou agenda na
and
programação.
monitoring and
Ganhou
assessment
agenda num programa dos
is now more valued.
com a exposição nesta Odisseia Nacional. Ganho agenda num momento chamado cenários, que acontece de 3 em 3 meses.
And
Vai
every
acontecer agora
quarter
em
we
Lolé,
have
dia
something
15 e
called
16,
scenarios.
com todos convidados.
The next session is in Lolé on the 15th and 16th, and you are all cordially
Deste
invited.
programa de 2 dias, há
This is a
realmente um
2-day
retorno
program,
sobre
and
aquilo que
in
fizemos,
that,
sobre os resultados que
during those 2 days, there's feedback on what we've done, how far we've come, but there's also a critical eye turned upon what we've done. There are many participants in this program.
Só dar também aqui uma nota em relação à pertença. O facto de termos que comunicar para o exterior fez-nos luz e
When it comes to
agora também
belonging, on
temos
the left-hand
3 em 3
side,
meses esta
every
oportunidade de
quarter
comunicar para o
we have a
exterior. Nem
chance
toda a equipa do Teatro Nacional
to
está
convey some information because
recursos humanos, financeiro,
our financial team, our HR team is in Lisbon. They are in Lisbon, they don't go out, and we want them to get to know our actions. Why is this person who is never out on the field, why is that person so relevant to our project? And one of the programs we have has to do with experience sharing.
Temos programa anexo de formação
we have a training program, and just yesterday I shared our methodologies, our tools in the field of training with a number of other bodies.
Então vou ser muito concisa.
I'll try and summarize.
Dizer-vos que para nós a área da monitorização
Let me
e
tell you
avaliação
that monitoring
é
and assessment
é um
is a democratic process.
onde todos os atores,
All the actors, regardless of their task and role, need to be heard. The public participants are at the core, but the whole team, the permanent and the temporary teams, patrons, media, other bodies, they're all part of these processes. We're not there yet, but this is our idea. This is where we want to get.
E pronto, só alguns desafios que neste momento temos em mão.
Some of the challenges that are ongoing. There's a research action logic behind this. I'm a researcher. I have all the methodologies and all the tools that I know, and I use them.
Mas há sempre esta dualidade de papel, não é? Eu avalio.
But I very often have two hats. I'm an assessor and I'm part of this body.
A análise bibliográfica do que já existe ajuda. De qualquer forma, há aqui uma série de desafios associados.
There's a number of challenges linked to that.
Como existe esta ideia de... se falou muito durante o dia, esta articulação plena entre indicadores
We talked about linking quantitative and
instrumentos quantitativos,
qualitative indicators and their tools and instruments.
Somos invadidos por indicadores quantitativos.
We are
subcarregados com indicadores que são
drowning in quantitative indicators. Sometimes they're the same thing under a different name. They're from the top down. They're not put in context. And this doesn't help. Most times it doesn't help us be a learning institution. These indicators aren't useful. And I'd like to close, maybe I'll close on a more negative note. I'd like to conclude, I would have liked to have concluded on a more positive note, but things are as they are. Thank you.
Pedro. Boa tarde a todos e a todas.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having invited me. Thank you to the National Plan for the Arts. And I know why you forgot to call me at first. Because what I'm going to say have nothing to do with what you're discussing here. I have no experiences to share. Maybe the only relevance is that, one, I worked in two of these foundations, and two, when I was there, I helped setting up more than 150 M&A systems in social, educational, cultural organizations. So maybe what I can propose to you today, and to close with on a positive note, to share with you some quotations by giants that I have been basing myself on to do this, and the same journey you decided to go with for M&A of your activity. Now this promise, or this is a mantra that I have used in 150 times. Not everything can be measured, but everything can be evaluated. So let me first start with a disclaimer. I don't like the idea of art for anything. I hate that. And I have always hated it, and I still hate it. Art for anything. Art for the sake of it. It doesn't have to serve for anything in particular. Cultural production does not have to be useful. I always fought this idea. But still, I helped many organizations overcoming this. I brought a quotation from Edgar Allan Poe saying that this poem is that. It is what it is, and for its own sake. So this functionalist, utilitarian culture, social impact, cultural capital,
enfim, eu acho isto tremendamente perigoso.
I think this is very dangerous, and not just I. I mean, this gentleman here said exactly the following. If art is to nourish the rules of our cultural society, we must set artists free to let them work as they will. And so you say, well, forget about that evaluation system. No, on the contrary, because in addition, we also know that our perception can fool us. Maybe I'm sure you know about this Sherlock Holmes joke, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. They were camping, and after a good dinner and bottle of wine, they went to sleep. Then Holmes woke up. He woke up his friend and said, Watson, look up, what do you see? He said, I see millions and millions of stars. What does this mean to you, Watson? Asked Sherlock. And Watson thought and said, well, in astronomical terms, it says that there are millions of galaxies, maybe billions of planets. Astrologically, I can see Saturn is in line with Leo. In terms of time, it's about 3.45 in the night, and theologically, I see that God is almighty and we are insignificant. Meteorologically, I suspect that tomorrow we'll have a nice day. But why did you ask, Sherlock? Why did you ask that? And Sherlock Holmes paused for a second and said, Watson, you fool. Some idiot stole our tent. Now, this short story took a minute, so I asked for 1 extra minute in my presentation to bring you to this point. Our perceptions are keep fooling us, betraying us, because perceptions and representations are precisely that. Our expectations about our outcomes are that. The opinions we exchange are that. Looking at the same object, and we can all see different things. Some of us see, instead of a trunk, see a snake, others see a spear, others a fan in the ear. So we are all talking about the same thing, but we are all looking at the same phenomena, but we are all seeing, feeling, perceiving different things in the same phenomenon. So where does this take us? To the fact that we need data. But data not just for the sake of data themselves, but not to meet protocols, not to be accountable to third parties, not to prove the value of culture and art. I reject that idea, absolutely. That's not what we need data for. We need data to help us dealing with these biases of human species. We are, by nature, we have biased perceptions. We have to collect information in order to help us have more objective perceptions. Does anyone of you consider it to be screen dependent? Well, how many of you are holding a telephone, a mobile phone? So that's what perceptions are. So it's also true that not everything that can be told matters. We spoke about quantitative indicators and perception for smart objectives. I don't think they have to be smart. Objectives can be, they must be useful. Indicators must be useful, relevant. They must be significant to those that follow. If they're just smart, just to account to PNA or to your boss, they don't make any sense. So anything that counts matters. And as it was said, a lot of things that matter cannot be counted. They don't fit quantitative indicators. They don't fit mixed methodologies, study cases, and 4 minutes to the end of my presentation. It is also true under this topic that there is some sort of course here, and I have seen it before, also at Gulbenkian, and now at Ministry of Education. It is that we tend to value more what we measure more, what we evaluate more. Look what is happening in my sector, in the secondary education, with access to university. See what the secondary education has become. It's a rat race, so that one day, in 1 hour, we have to prove the merit of a student. This is unbelievable, unimaginable, but it is happening. Just like we evaluate at the end of the secondary education, all those impacts. The whole system is organized around that. We could give more examples. Yesterday we had the math PISA results. PISA shows that the countries change their curriculum to be closer to PISA's objectives, have much better results. I mean, this story has been told before, and I didn't sign the article. So we have to be very careful about the indicators we select, about the target we select. They are not. It is not naive. It is not indifferent. And then the value of monitoring. We don't have to adjust the monitoring and evaluation systems. It is a tailor, it is the monitoring system that has to adjust to us. I don't have to work to the indicator or to the target. I hear this so many times. I have to work for the indicator. No, not at all. The target, the indicator has to work for me. It has to help us. It has to help me. What? Fighting biases, because we can all see just a part of the elephant or different stars differently. That's what indicators and targets are for. Then that whole dichotomy, and I participated in the interesting debates in Copenhagen about this long-lasting dichotomy with creativity, artistic production versus the measure, versus the social impact. Well, if we are here in this room, it's because we understood it. That's a false question. There's no issue, there's no difficulty in assessing the impact in cultural organizations or education organizations or social organizations. No, not difficult. But we have to make the decision, and we have to know to tell the tailor what to do and not let the tailor tell us what to do. That's the trick. And Nietzsche said precisely that. So the question is, what has education to do with all this? I'd say that if and when we have to think about indicators for your organizations in terms of education, the most traditional is to think, in what I do, what does this have to do with the different subjects? Portuguese, math, physics, chemistry, passing, failing, what this is to do with motivation to learn. All these questions, don't ask them. They have been answered already. We know there are hundreds of papers showing that. Go back and have published over 100 articles showing this in scientific international journals, peer-reviewed, whatever. And I use all the jargon now. So more than 100. They have been published. We know that. So what is important? It's the rest. It's this. The profile of the students after when he graduates from high school. So in my last 45 seconds, I would ask you to Google in your mobile phones, student performed upon completion of secondary education. Portugal finally, in 2018, was able to put in a single page, just a single page, a clear vision about what we expect at the end of 12 years of schooling. And what we expect from a student after 12 years of schooling is not just that they can read, write, count, physics, math, philosophy. No, it's much more than that. And the more you look at that much more, the easier it will be to understand the important contribution of cultural organizations to meet this profile. And from one last second, this profile will not become. It cannot be brought about without you. It's impossible to talk about developing aesthetic and artistic sensibility, developing critical thinking and creative thinking, problem resolution and reasoning, interpersonal relations, autonomy, well-being. This is not just with a classroom that we can achieve it. And if you want to know what type of indicators you must look for in your monitoring plans, I suggest this. It is possible.
Muito obrigada a todos.
Now, each presentation. I say, first we can talk about meaning, the value of institutions and cultural organizations. And two questions Hugo asked. Why and for whom? So maybe we can start debate with this. Questions left by your questions. So, Hugo, why and for whom? That's difficult after Pedro, speaking after Pedro.
Apetece-me contar mais uma história.
So let me tell you another story.
Arrisco-me a contá-la,
And I
assumindo a fragilidade,
assume, as Paulo said this morning, that
dela não ser completa.
it may
Mas é
not
bocadinho
be
a minha
full,
história
but
também
it is
numa
also
estrutura
my story
para ver
in a structure so that you can see
a iniciativa Parties. Agora
the
Parties
parties
chegar a uma quinta edição.
initiative. It's on its 5th edition, and
Ganhar
it must
a vontade política
get
interna dentro da
internal
instituição.
political will within an institution that has a hierarchy and that has
Muito interessante.
decisions are made at the top. And no matter how interesting certain quantitative indicators may be, I must say, and
Do para quem.
this is answering the for whom, a lot of the achievements, in my personal opinion, of living experience, a lot of the achievements we have had with our people at the top was when we were able to
Na fundação ou fora da fundação, onde a transformação acontece.
bring them to spaces where change happens in the foundation. I remember some moments, maybe the most obvious one was
Nunca seria uma prioridade.
what would never be a priority in 2013, to work with inmates,
O grande auditório.
and then we had the large hall of the Republican Foundation with inmates on stage, transforming also and questioning prejudice
Uma audiência mista,
with a mixed
tradicionais,
audience, some traditional
mas com
foundation clients, but also with the administration there. And this is
paradoxal porque
almost a paradox, because
sempre defendi
I have always defended the process, not necessarily the artistic object.
mas concluo hoje
But today I come to the conclusion that the artistic object in the process is absolutely crucial to all stakeholders, to the organizations that make the decisions, and providing
palco e uma orquestra.
stage and an orchestra. And I'm sorry if I focus on this case, but okay, I could give you other examples. But there is a structure in Leiria.
Que normalmente em circunstâncias normais
In normal circumstances, we not have access to this, and to
aquele universo de
that
participantes
universal participants
e suas famílias
and their families
e a quem também é dada a possibilidade
that
de
had
partilhar
the
isto.
possibility to share their anxieties.
Acaba por ter
So eventually
de
this
alguma forma, creio eu, uma fotografia das várias partes do para quem.
shows for whom this can be done.
Muitas vezes
But the qualitative is often written in
não me leves a mal, Raquel,
reports,
não chega
is
a
not
mexer nas entranhas como
the-
quando somos efetivamente
the-
confrontados.
does not get so much into detail as when we are confronted with this moment. I'm sorry if I did not answer exactly to the question. Okay, are there any questions on the floor?
Valorização destas estratégias
Now,
para as instituições.
The value of these strategies to the institutions. So the institutions, are institutions upgraded? Are they valued by these strategies?
Para as instituições,
Well,
e no caso concreto das fundações,
In the concrete
a
case of
medição do impacto,
foundations, measuring the
é
impact
vital.
is crucial.
As fundações existem porque a
Foundations
sociedade nos dá
exist because
autorização
society allows them to exist as such.
e são instituições
And
que
they
estão ao
are
serviço do bem comum.
Institutions that
E não basta
are
fazer,
at the service of
é
common
preciso
good.
termos a certeza que estamos
And
a fazer da melhor maneira
it's not just
possível,
doing
usar
things, we have to
da
do
melhor
them
maneira
in
possível.
the best way we can,
As fundações têm
making
que
the
ter
best use of
certeza
resources, and
de
foundations have to have this
Isso,
certainty
faz todo
to
sentido internamente,
improve, and
afinarem a sua
so it
atuação.
makes all sense that they
Faz sentido
do this
externamente,
monitoring and evaluation
é preciso
internally and
comunicar
externally,
o que
because they
faz,
have
e é
to
preciso
communicate what they
que
are
a
doing,
sociedade,
and society,
para continuar a
sorry, to
aceitar
society,
a
so the
existência
society keeps
destas instituições,
accepting the existence of these
continuam a ver
institutions
que elas fazem a
and
diferença.
saying that they make a
E
difference.
nós às vezes não temos esta percepção.
And sometimes we do not have
As
this
organizações
perception,
da
but
sociedade civil, de facto,
civil
existem.
society
Nós, enquanto
organizations
sociedade
exist
civil,
because civil
damos
society gives them
benefícios
certain
para
benefits to
existir,
exist,
e damos-lhes
and
subsídios
we give them subsidies
para fazerem
to
projetos, etc,
develop
etc.
projects, etc.
Por exemplo, o No Poupar está o ganho da Fundação.
For instance, in No Poupar está o ganho, the program of the António Portugal Foundation about savings, this project is going on for the past 10 years. It's a small project. To set it up,
Precisa de convencer investidores.
we have to convince investors.
E, portanto, o impacto
So,
social que mede desde o
the
início
social
também
impact
foi para
that
a
we measure
Fundação
from the
perceber
beginning,
que está
we've been
a
measuring it
ano
from the
após
beginning
ano,
because we
a
wanted to
mudar,
understand that
perceber que
year
a
after year
comunidade
there are things that we could improve. And this sense of improvement is provided also by the evaluation data. And besides, the impact evaluation is also important because it's a way of communicating with the schools, with the local authorities. A lot of local authorities are invested today in this project to communicate with other funders. And so it's like part of our briefing, this measurement. We started in a simple way with a master's degree dissertation by a student, then it evolved, and today we have almost an experimental measurement. Our classes with intervention, classes without intervention, we can measure the impact on with students, with their parents and families that learn to manage better budgets because of this learning that the students have at school. And after 10 years, I can tell you that it is part of what we do. It's natural. Doing this evaluation, I'm not sure I answered your question, but that's what I can tell you. Well, we do have to cut short. I have lot of questions to ask, but we do have to cut short. So let's break now for a brief coffee. We can continue our conversation outside. Thank you.
Para avisar que retomamos às 4h30, 12 minutos. Obrigada. Olá, bem-vindos de volta. Estamos aqui então para apresentar a segunda conversa da tarde, práticas e expectativas à volta das questões do impacto.
Expectations around impact and evaluation.
Esta conversa vai
This
ser
talk
moderada
will,
pelo
or
Fátima
this
Roque,
panel will be moderated by Fátima Roque,
Palácios da DGPC.
Director of Museums and Palaces at the DGPC,
Palácio Nacional da Ajuda.
the Director of the National Ajuda Palace, Marta Martins, Executive Director of Arte and Redo, Aida Alves, Director of Lúcia Carveiro Silva Library, Paulia Paulo, Director of Library at the Municipality of Lolé, and Mário Rodrigues, so Director of something related to arts. Good afternoon, everyone. I will first thank the National Plan for the Arts and its commissioners, the team that was worked for the foundation of CISOC, and also I thank namely Clara Camacho for having invited me to be here to speak to you. I'm very pleased to participate in this conference. I am sure that it will contribute a lot to the agenda of public policies in the realm of culture. I greet the other participants here on this panel. They have already been introduced and they are known to a lot of you. And to those that are in this room and those that participate and are watching online our event. Now, in order to have some time for discussion afterwards, let's move forward. We know that the post-planning and self-evaluation of public cultural organizations in terms of its social impact, we have been hearing this throughout the day. In this panel, we'll explore practices and experiences of each of the panelists, a diversified range of experiences and situations with different expectations regarding the role of CISOC. The participants in this talk will have about 7 minutes. I beg of you to abide by this timing. And during our talk, I will ask a few questions to each one of you. And so it's not really talking to each other, but we will listen to each one's experiences and then I will open the floor. So, to José Alberto Ribeiro, my question is, we thought this was not for us. You'll understand this because this is a statement that José Alberto uses quite often, although it is not his quotation, but from the audiences that he hosts in the project is going to tell us about. And the question I will ask José Alberto is, a common problem to museums and national palaces that often they are not visited by the people that live in the neighborhood. The National Palace of Ajuda has been involved in a local collaborative project, My Palace it is called. And I asked José Alberto to share with us some of the results that have been achieved, namely in terms of the social impact on the nearby populations, and how a tool like CISOC can contribute to monitor and self-evaluate the action of the Ajuda National Palace towards diversifying its audiences. José Alberto, you have the floor. Thank you. Well, I greet the other members of the panel. Because time is short, and I must thank Dr. Clara Camacho, Mr. João Soares Neves, and all those that are involved in this project, with the collaboration of ICOM, DGPC, and a common pillar in this kind of concept. I'm not going to repeat, but we were proposed to work in this evaluation model to implement a project based on, as I said, these criteria. So the project to value the cultural heritage between the local community and the National Palace of Ajuda. And the project involved, well, it has community support involving the National Palace of Ajuda, the Parish of Ajuda, and the Kushka Association. So it's a local cultural association. Now, this is under the scope of a project of the operational ERDF program in Lisbon 2020 for a period of 3 years, 2021 to 2023, and supported in the city of Lisbon and neighborhoods that were in what we can call problematic neighborhoods, with issues of inclusion and local communities. The neighborhood of Ajuda has 3 areas that are particularly complicated: Casalinho, 3 de Maio, and Rio Seco quarters. Now, so what did we do? This was a highly participated project where the National Palace of Ajuda education process had an important part to play. Mrs. Carla Costa and Teresa Moregas that are present here, they were the leaders of this project, and it was an organic project. It was so participated that it was built along the way. And what we wanted to make sure it was My Palace is what we call the project. It's My Palace, your palace, our palace. And everything was thought and with the collaboration and ideas suggested by others. It was not, the approach was not what this palace / museum, well, it's an art and history museum at the same time, what can it offer to these communities? What did they want to see in the museum? They would like to have music, for instance, or something they identified with. And this was done involving during all the pandemic, and I cannot list all the activities that took place then, but a lot of activities were worked together with the schools, namely several middle schools in the neighborhood with different realities in terms of their student population. Some had pupils that were of Muslim background. Also Cape Verdean community that lives in the neighborhood, or even the Gypsy community that lives in the area. Of course, everything that was done was in order so that they would, when they say my palace, your palace, our palace. For instance, capacity building workshops together with the staff of the palace and the library, such as workshop, capacity building workshops with our wood carving specialist, not textiles, with our expert on textiles, and then some of these people that participate in these workshops, they have even been able to open shop. Some of them wanted also to work as volunteers, and in every neighborhood we wanted to have volunteers that would bring, that they were like ambassadors, to bring those communities to the palace, to bring, say on special days, community, Gypsy community to sing, or the Cape Verde drummers. Also, in the workshops, we always have the consent of the young ones. When we held these workshops, and they're working with jewels of the royal treasure, namely how the royal crown was assembled. Of course, the Muslim kids, they would not put the cross at the top of the crown, and so we had activities that bring discipline and rules to certain games, but and always associated with the history of the palace, like fencing with the Portuguese Fencing Federation, and kids from these more problematic schools. We explained what were the ways to what were the rules of the game in terms of pacifism and compliance. And then we also organized visits to certain communities, like the senior citizens in the Ajuda, Fado contest. There was a gentleman in one of these contests. He was an 81 years old, actually, gentleman who said, "Well, how long have you been living here?" "I live here for the past 50 years. And have you ever been to the palace?" I didn't think it was for us. I thought it wasn't meant for us. So, to me and to the other staff members that work on this project, it was very important to get this feedback from the people that attended the project. The funding was provided or managed by the parish and by the Kushka Association. They even created a theatre with volunteers. They organized a ceremony in the museum stay. It was extremely interesting. They interpreted the palace from the very history of the palace. So the history, we didn't want to have a very formal way of telling these stories. The kings, the dancing, all as if this is nothing. This is something we never had. No, what we conveyed was one moment in time in history. There was a family living here. They played. They had meals. They slept. They danced. But it was not so different from what we have in our houses. So from this reality, from this role play, which is common to our families 300 years ago or today, all activities were developed based on that. The works for this My Palace project are still ongoing. A logo was developed, materials were prepared. All this generated a movement around the palace where people felt involved, and they taught us a lot. And this has always been the view of those that work in the education department, to convey knowledge, but also to receive knowledge. At the end of the day, we wanted to promote social inclusion, fight poverty, discrimination, and mostly, in a nutshell, by following this criteria of education, protecting the environment, all these criteria that were defined, we were able to have an education for the artistic and historic heritage, with gaining social skills, professional skills, solidarity, social cohesion, inclusion, security, equality, and that's the social impact we were able to have. This is the true power of museums, and when we are able to work like this, of course there are other ways to work. This was quite innovative to the Ajuda National Palace, how we were able to connect to the community, to the local community, how we were able to welcome this community, to receive this community, and we still do it. I hope that we will continue to come. This is an ongoing process. It's organic. It will keep growing. We just don't do more because there are limits in terms of human resources and financial resources, but the project was a reality and we are still developing it.
Thank you. We didn't broach the issue of maybe applying the CISOC, but from what Albert said, we could all glean what it means to work with and not work for, something that we've heard so often from Paulo Pires de Val. Now I'd like to give the floor to Aida Alves,
a direção da Biblioteca Lúcio Craveiro da Silva, Biblioteca de Leitura Pública de Braga,
desenvolve public library in Braga, in the north of Portugal, develops outreach programs. I know you assess internally the results of all actions and how it affects a number of different audiences. We're talking about knowing your audiences and working with them. I'd like you to tell us about these experiences, about a couple of projects that showcase working with. Thank you for the invitation to be here. I thank José Neves and Clara Camacho, and I thank you all for allowing me to be here and share something that is hard to summarize in 7 minutes. I get nervous just thinking that I have nothing but 7 minutes when faced with all these projects. We are and we should be active agents in our territory in order to be able to transform all areas of the public. This is how public libraries are born. Under the scope of the Portuguese network of public libraries, we have continuous input in order to come closer to the community. We also have people, because it's people who implement the plans, it's the people who make the difference. And let me thank Susana Leite, who's here representing the coordination of the National Plan from the Arts. She comes from Braga. She's implemented a lot of momentum together with other partners and the municipality of Braga. And I saw the partners of the Braga Municipality Culture Division. They've done tremendous work
nos
in terms
apelado a
of
participar
proximity,
muito em diferentes atividades.
and they've
Nós pertencemos
incentivized us to take part in various activities. We are a part of 4 or 5 working networks. Whenever I am planning for 2024, I'm not alone. I find it hard to program, but when you're part of a network of public libraries, when we're part of a network of school or community libraries, of civil parishes, etc., when we're part of a public library network, and I'd like to thank all those who have been very inclusive when it comes to libraries. And I'd like to thank the Minho University Library Network we're linked with. There are a lot of knots in the Portuguese territory. There needs to be an intersection because none of us are alone. We need to think about all of us together. That's the only way to achieve synergies and reach broader audiences, because the National Plan for the Arts, the National Reading Program, a festival here, another festival there, we're all there. We're active agents. And I'd like to talk about 2 practices that we've carried out over the past year. Reading with arts. The idea is to merging the National Plans for the Arts and the National Plan for Reading. And we tried to draft an action plan to bring plastic artists to schools and to bring people to public libraries. Ler com Artes, Reading with Arts, aims to publicize 1 author in 22-23, was a local author. And this project had 20 sessions with 10 school classes, and they were all invited to come down to the library and share with us what they've done and become members of our public library. They've met writers, artists, and then we publicized we publicized all the writers' books and works. Susanna monitored some of these sessions. This happened in 22-23. It was a major hit because there was an assessment. We assessed all the teachers involved. And so we did it again. It's ongoing. For first, second, and third class until March 2024. But now we'll bring the biographies of painters and other artists so that they can grow their artistic culture. Therefore, the model this year is a little different. I'd also like to say that the first semester this year we had an initiative called experimental painting. There was an artist involved, a local artist involved. We're always talking with local artists. And the idea is to develop for a specific target audience 6 workshops.
Pintura experimental,
Experimental painting,
utilização de no fundo, de diferentes linguagens artísticas, desenho, pintura, escultura, fotografia,
involved painting,
junto de quem?
sculpture,
Junto
photography,
de utentes,
sculpting,
da
etc.
CDM, do Centro Novais e Sousa,
We
da IES,
worked with
do Reabilitação e Integração Social,
several
da
different
Casa em Paz e
institutions,
Rede,
parents'
da AIA,
institutions,
todas as instituições locais do território ligadas
local
a
institutions
pessoas portadoras
linked
de deficiência e incapacidade.
to handicapped people.
Foram 6 meses, foram
And
6
people with
oficinas,
disabilities.
foram,
We had
no
6
fundo,
workshops.
trabalhos que foram participados, em que eles desenvolveram um conceito também
All
de
participants
ambiente,
developed
representar em linguagem artística, e isto resultou
the
agora
concept
numa
of
exposição
atmosphere,
coletiva
and they
que está a
needed to
decorrer agora
represent
na
that,
biblioteca,
and the result was an art exhibit
Portanto, o que é que
at the
acontece?
library.
Temos efetivamente um valor confirmado que foi de alguma forma um valor e importância das bibliotecas em seio do território local.
We reiterated how important libraries are for local people.
E o que é que aconteceu? Nós tivemos efetivamente um impacto em termos de habilidades e competências que foram verificadas pelos
We made an impact in terms of skills with both programs, with experimental painting and reading with art. There was a change in attitude. Many of these people with disabilities started reading at the library.
De algumas têm hábito leitor quase continuado, dias a cada 15 dias.
And now people have developed the habit of coming to the library every 2 weeks. There's been an improvement in their health and well-being.
No fundo, a apropriação e valorização da cultura local, o reconhecimento da diversidade.
People acknowledged multicultural diversity. There was a positive appreciation of what libraries do and how they network.
E assim também uma experiência de inclusão e de coesão.
And there's also an experience of
Evidências
territorial
de forma
inclusion and cohesion.
de forma solicitada e de forma observada. Portanto, nós temos
So all this data comes from surveys and from observation.
Nas redes sociais.
Some of the results have been published.
E fruto deste nosso trabalho. Isto é uma percentagem ínfima do nosso trabalho.
This represents a small percentage of our work that ended up in awarding the Ler Mais Award. Thank you.
Aida, muitíssimo obrigada. Continuamos a
Thank you so much. We'll still talk about feeling of belonging, audiences, the impact that our actions and projects and measures can have.
Nas comunidades que nos rodeiam. Ficou realmente aqui mais uma experiência que certamente
This is another experience, and I know because I talked to Aida before. I know this left very fertile ground because Aida told me that they often get the team together, they talked, and they do an internal analysis of the measures, ongoing measures, pursuant to their strategic plans. I'll now give the floor to Marta Martins. On the website of Arte em Rede, you can read, the backdrop is continuous and sustained. What is immediate as a project? How has Arte em Rede developed awareness raising and capacity building? And I'd like you to tell us how useful you find CISOC within the scope of what you do. Thank you, Fatima. Thank you for allowing me to share my experience of Arte em Rede.
Na verdade, essa tem sido
tem sido desafio constante.
What you just talked about, this has been a constant challenge.
Desde há algum tempo, sobretudo desde o plano estratégico da
for a long time now, since the strategic plan for Arte em Rede 2015, we felt the need to assess our impact wherever we're active. Many of our projects are anchored or are linked to the participation of communities, especially the projects co-financed by parties. They depend on the personal involvement of all participants. We felt this need, it's true, but the patrons and the partners also demand us that we assess our impact, but there is not enough funding for us to conduct this assessment. We're before a dilemma. Should we draw money from the activities in order to provide the assessment, or how could we fund the assessment because we lack human resources and funding?
E até nos deparamos com algumas incoerências, como
and there are some inconsistencies because they ask us that we assess projects financed by PT 2020, but the activities themselves were not eligible.
E foi isso que fizemos, portanto fomos investindo, mas claro, a uma escala mais
we invested at a smaller scale.
Temos em curso estudo de impacto da atividade.
There's an impact study ongoing.
Muito pequeno, só uma amostragem da nossa atividade.
This is just a sample of our activity we work with. Then we set.
Que deparou com várias dificuldades, nomeadamente
there have been several hurdles along the way. The data were not segregated in a systemic way.
E também fomos experimentando algumas ferramentas de autoavaliação em projetos
tried out some assessment tools
do programa Parties, nomeadamente os mecanismos já instituídos pelo programa,
the tools
que fomos inventando.
The Parties program helped us, but then we developed other tools together with our partners in a strict cooperation with CIES. This allowed us to identify liabilities, the project's liabilities, and any issues that came up during their implementation. I wanted to use this time to talk about two tools that we were able to develop.
No âmbito de outros projetos de arte em rede, em que percebemos que, por um lado, precisávamos de uma ferramenta.
On the one hand, sometimes we felt we needed a tool to analyze and identify the audiences, not just quantitative but also qualitative. But we also needed a tool that helped us assess the quality of the participation in participative artistic projects, because most of the projects we're developing involve communities, but the concept of participation is very wide-ranging, and we could sit here and talk about it for hours. But very often we feel that our expectations, the expectations of municipalities, of participants, of artists, they often don't merge together, and the project would be lacking because it wasn't clear whether or not all parties were participating and what we could expect in terms of return. And we couldn't find any tool that allowed us to assess the quality of participation, because there can be several aspects to it. And therefore, in the scope of a European project co-financed by a Creative Europe program, this program involves 14 bodies, Arte em Rede, Iscte, where we are, Dinamisat Research Center. It's called
e que junta
the Southern
organizações
Coalition.
culturais e instituições académicas do sul da Europa e da periferia. E
And this brings together several institutions of academia and arts in Europe and its neighborhood.
Tem a ver exatamente com a dificuldade da
One of the issues brought up was the difficulty in assessing the impact our actions have with the communities we work with. We started working with all our partners and all of the academic bodies of this project. We developed 2 tools will be made available very soon on our website. One is a tool to assess the audiences. There will be surveyors outside any given event. People will be interviewed. This is a survey that will allow us to profile the audiences, social aspects, economic, etc., but also how the experience was, how they felt. So a lot of qualitative and emotional fields. There will also be another tool, the tool to assess the quality of participation in participative artistic processes. This was also developed jointly with all partners. We adjusted as per the context. We're talking about here 10 countries in Southern Europe and Balkans. Some adaptations were made. This is a very complex tool with different dimensions. There's a guide to guide the surveyors. The surveyor will apply this guide. There's also a guide to interview the artist. There's a guide to interview organizers, co-producers. In case of this project, it will be applied by the Dinamisat team, but they can also self-assess themselves. The observation guide to be filled in by the mediator.
E no final há uma ficha de avaliação que é preenchida depois de fim de todo o processo e que parte das informações colhidas através destas 4 ferramentas. Portanto,
bring together
isto também tem sido interessante aplicá-lo à medida que o projeto vai decorrendo, porque os resultados das conversas que são realizadas para a aplicação destas ferramentas permite fazer melhorias nos processos participativos seguintes.
This will allow everyone to take part in other participative projects.
Gostaria de reforçar também aquilo que a Maria de Assis estava a dizer de manhã, a importância da articulação, porque estamos todos, certamente existem outras experiências de avaliação.
There are people have other monitoring and assessment experiences. We're all working together, but when cross-referencing these experiences, CISOC will be key, and I'm sure this will help. Maybe what we do will help improve the CISOC too. Thank you.
Eu percebi agora que alterei aqui um bocadinho a ordem, mas não tem problema absolutamente nenhum. Só para fazer um brevíssimo comentário, na minha conversa com a Marta, chegávamos precisamente a esta conclusão, que não é propriamente nenhum ovo de Colombo. Estamos vários de entre nós, nas nossas organizações, efetivamente a trabalhar em ferramentas que nos permitam repensar, autoavaliar os nossos planos estratégicos, as nossas ações, a nossa relação com os públicos. Eu penso que foi o José Alberto que falou, e devemos ter ainda presentes na sala, elementos da unidade técnica do programa Ibermuseus. Lançou-se também este ano, no Dia Internacional dos Museus, o Guia de Autoavaliação em Sustentabilidade. É mais uma ferramenta que pretende precisamente juntar, reunir as equipas em torno de quem as dirige e aplicar vários indicadores construídos por uma mesa técnica ao longo de anos, ao longo de 2 anos, sensivelmente, de modo a aferir a sua ação em torno daquilo que nós consideramos as principais funções museológicas, em articulação ou intercruzando com o conceito de sustentabilidade da forma como foi definido pelo programa Ibermuseus. Enfim, é mais uma nota para quem quiser poder vir a explorar. Agora vou passar de imediato à Dália Paulo. O departamento que a Dália dirige tem um foco cultural lato, que procura implementar e consolidar junto aos públicos uma estratégia municipal para a cultura. Eu sei que a Dália vai abordar um pouco esta estratégia de uma forma abrangente e também referir-se ao Museu Municipal de Lolé, que, como sabemos, tem desenvolvido experiências de participação e colaboração cidadã em processos que implicam criação de laços, gestão de expectativas e outros de construção colaborativa e envolvimento de equipas e da comunidade. Portanto, peço à Dália que nos fale um pouco sobre esses processos. Muito obrigada.
Muito obrigada. Boa tarde a todas e a todos. Cumprimento a mesa na pessoa da doutora Fátima e uma palavra muito especial, claro, à doutora Clara Camacho pelo convite para estar aqui e partilhar um pouco das experiências. Vou roubar meio minuto só para dizer que depois da história do José Alberto, que me fez recuar quase 20 anos, quando eu estava como diretora do Museu Municipal de Faro, apetecia-me não falar nada daquilo que falei, até porque tínhamos um projeto muito parecido na altura, e falar apenas de um dos meus grandes falhanços profissionais foi quando comecei a trabalhar com a comunidade nos idos de 2002. Mas pronto, isso fica para outra altura. A doutora Clara depois logo me convida para vir falar do meu grande falhanço. Portanto, era bom que fosse um departamento de cultura, é uma direção municipal e tem muito mais que a cultura, mas isso são outras histórias. O que eu vos queria partilhar convosco aqui, no âmbito do CISOC e desta mesa, podia partilhar alguns projetos de outros equipamentos culturais do município, mas vou-me centrar em 2 projetos na área do Museu Municipal e 2 projetos que não foram escolhidos por acaso para partilhar aqui convosco. Um primeiro é aqui para este meu amigo do meu lado direito, porque me roubou uma excelente técnica, que começou a trabalhar na Direção-Geral das Artes a semana passada. Hoje é a primeira semana, estamos a 6, portanto a semana passada, e era a pessoa que dinamizava uma das iniciativas que quero partilhar aqui convosco, que faz todo o sentido, que é uma iniciativa comunitária na área das coleções. O Museu Municipal de Lolé tem uma vastíssima coleção de fotografia e as fotografias às vezes nada nos dizem. E então nós resolvemos em 2015 fazer uma atividade que foi uma atividade que se tornou mensal, envolvendo a comunidade, partilhando com a comunidade, mas também recebendo muito da comunidade. Chamava-se e chama-se, porque outra colega continuou e continua agora a desenvolver, creio que é esta semana, amanhã é a próxima, já sem a Helga Seródio. Chama-se Desculpe Como Me Chamo. O que é o Desculpe Como Me Chamo? É o envolvimento da comunidade sénior de Lolé, naquilo que é a nossa identidade, que são as nossas memórias. Nós estamos a falar em centenas, para não dizer milhares, de registros fotográficos que nós não sabíamos nada e que este Desculpe Como Me Chamo fez dar nome novamente àquelas pessoas, dar nome às famílias, voltar a colocar as famílias em contacto com aquelas pessoas, com fotografias que muitos dos descendentes já não conheciam, mas ao mesmo tempo permitiu também um relacionamento forte daquela comunidade que não se relacionava muito e que não tinha uma empatia muito grande com o museu. deixámos de ter o público para termos os nossos embaixadores séniores do Museu Municipal de Lolé e aumentámos a nossa coleção, porque eles próprios querem ver a sua família representada na comunidade e na nossa coleção do Museu Municipal de Lolé. Portanto, é um projeto que é um projeto em colaboração. Nós hoje falámos já aqui muito, não trabalhar para, mas trabalhar com a comunidade. Eu, há uns anos atrás, quando me apaixonei pela museologia, descobri uma declaração de Santiago do Chile, que fiquei completamente rendida e que a partir daí não consegui fazer outra coisa do que ir para a comunidade e trabalhar com. Por isso falhei muito, porque precisamos de tempo, precisamos de mudar a nossa forma de trabalhar e, portanto, este nosso projeto de Desculpe Como Me Chamo é um projeto que vai evoluindo e a sua relação com a comunidade. E eu comecei por vos falar da comunidade idosa, mas nós vamos tendo cada vez mais pessoas menos idosas também a querer participar neste projeto. O segundo projeto, podia ser a minha colega Alexandra Pires, que está aqui também a falar dele, até se calhar com mais propriedade ou mais criticamente do que fazê-lo, ou então o meu querido amigo António Carvalho, que também participou. Foi uma parceria com o Museu Nacional de Arte
and the National Museum of Ancient Art
com o Museu Nacional de Arqueologia.
and Archaeology. It is
Uma exposição num sítio
an exhibition at the place you know about, Quarteira in the Algarve. Does this mean anything to you? Well, Quarteira is sun and beach, lack of urban planning, but words like identity, memory, community, maybe that they don't say so much. And therefore, in order to be shocking, we chose as a subject, feet on the land, hands on the ocean, 6,000 years of history in Quarteira. Now, we had not chosen the title yet when we decided to organize an exhibition with the community, the local community. So we went to a local advisory council with about 20 people, fishermen, farmers, other people from the community. So this advisory council had people with different literacies and different educations, different professions. There was also an important history professor, and it was precisely the history teacher that told us that when we said we are going to propose 6,000 years of history in Quarteira, impossible. Quarteira is not 6,000 years old. Even, though coming from the local community, didn't believe that. So it was interesting because more than donators of objects, more than importers of memories, more than spokespersons of the community, more than actors of history, they were the doers of history, their history, that history that we were going to tell, mainly that recent history, the one of the embrace. We say that the exhibition is embraced by the past 100 years, and they were also the doers of other histories. There were moments of tension, there were moments of conflict, there were also many moments of tears and emotion. They were lived in different meetings, and these meetings were individual meetings, but also collective. And so we learned that these processes are more and more important, because that is not our exhibition, it's a community's exhibition. It was a temporary one-year exhibition. It's now been on for the past 3 years, and we can only take it out when we get in the museum pole in the Quarteira. So for you to know how important this exhibition was to that community. Now, these are knowledge processes, mutual knowledge processes of commitment, trust, courage, cooperation, and something that is very important and sometimes we forget about, but Marta also mentioned it, that we have to put into common, and citizenship. And it is so important today, citizenship. Now, to close, and speaking of CISOC, the Municipal Museum of Lolé. In these two projects that I have just outlined very briefly, has been gaining ground in its social context and becoming more relevant in social terms. Besides, the context of Quarteira is an example of that. The population will not let the exhibition to end without having its permanent place of memory where people can come back to. So it is becoming a place of belonging, questioning, conflict, as you may guess, and transformation. These are difficult to implement projects. I mean, speaking is easy. It seems that the team was very consensual about this process. Well, that was not the case. There was no consensus because that required a new challenge from the team, the challenge to create new routines, new ways of thinking and doing, of being and listening, of positioning before the others non-experts at the level of the non-acting experts. So we need time to to travel the road, to be plural. But museums are places of empowerment of the communities, and we've seen this in these two projects. So the Municipal Museum of Lolé, I promised to Sarah and Clara that we want to be part. We want to be involved in the first stage of training of your project, to implement this commitment, CISOC, because for us, a small museum, small archive, small library, and small theatre, these are the four important equipment in our city, in the municipality of Lolé. I mean, this is a tool important to us, important to help us have the capacity, on one hand, to get to know each other better, where we are, and to have our quantitative and qualitative arguments, and a lot has been said about this, but it has been further discussed. So, to negotiate with the ministers, the necessary means to achieve our mission and goals, and on the other hand, for the populations to claim their museum, more means to their museum, to their library, to their cultural equipment. This means that this tool empowers teams, makes them aware of what has to be changed. At least this is what I see from CISOC, the way to go, and its relations with the others, the impact it has, well, it still doesn't have in certain cases, in transforming the world around it and the communities. And to close, a poem. Ladies, going to do a poem by Tolentino Mendonça. A poem in 2023 says, museum is first and foremost a human laboratory. The major questions of all social classes are presented here. It's a place of encounter with fundamental questions, an exercise of memory, a place where we can see ourselves. Thank you, CISOC, for making us see better. Thank you.
Muito obrigada, Dália.
Well, you touched upon two things that I'm sure you agree are key in this self-assessment processes, getting to know and getting involved in our audiences and communities. The expression Dália used was social relevance. It is not just impact, social impact, it's social relevance that these projects bring to the lives of those people that we involve, that we engage, and with whom we learn a lot in developing our work. Another expression important was the paradigm of change, of changing mindset regarding our attitude when we put people at the center. That's an expression used by CISOC, and that's what sometimes is difficult to do when we try to implement this regular self-evaluation registry. Now I give the floor to Americo, last but not the least. Americo, the Director General for the Arts, has relations with a broad large number of stakeholders. Art and territorial cohesion is an example of that. Could you tell us about this program, or other programs if you wish, and the effects that you think are pertinent or important in cultural organizations regarding self-evaluation, like the ones that we are watching here and debating here. Good afternoon to all participants. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for this opportunity to allow the Director General for the Arts to participate in this discussion. Maybe I should first make some opening context. The Director General for the Arts was a body that was known to give support, financial support to artists through tenders and with the ensuing controversy. But little by little, it has become something different. And I believe in this transformation, dialogue with the territory, dialogue with other areas, dialogue with other themes, namely in the social area. So, in addition to the support, sustainable support to artistic entities, support projects, we created a system called partnership support. We provide support to artists projects in mental health, science, interculturality, environment. Well, a broad range of projects that we added to the almost 800 projects that DG Arts already had. A lot of projects, but we felt nevertheless that this part, that an entity that gives support to the arts should do, because we're not doing it. That is, relating to the country as a whole, correcting or trying to correct the contribution to correct the symmetries, regional symmetries, and dialogue with other areas of knowledge. And that's what we have been doing. It is an internal transformation process, not always visible from the outside, but it is a whole program, namely DG Arts, created the Portuguese network of theatres and cinemas, which now encompasses about 90, or more than 90 equipment facilities. And we also have a pledge financial support system and a program of qualification to the people that work at these theatres. And it is also associated research to the theatre network. And it also created something we call the Portuguese Network of Contemporary Art. 2 days ago, we launched a tender of support to these tenders throughout the country, and to participate they have to be in partnership, in dialogue with the communities, with the territory. Again, territory. So, DG Arts, also somewhat surprisingly, coordinates a magnificent work called the National Program Know-How. It is a program on arts and crafts, traditional arts and crafts. The simple distribution of this task to DG Arts. At first, it may seem like a provocation, but then we have to come to the conclusion that it is something that benefits DG Arts, because it allows us to question ourselves, to question our mission, to question our task, very much centered around artistic work, erudite culture, but craft work brings popular culture to an organization that not long ago was providing financial support. And this reinvents or helps reinventing DG Arts and dialogue with the country. And so the national program know-how is a great contribution for us to change, because it allows us to be connected to the whole country. That is very relevant. Of course, every now and then we have to go and get staff members from elsewhere in the country. It makes sense. So we see DG Arts see in a positive way the creation of this mechanism, CISOC, which corresponds somehow to something that we have been longing for a long time ago. Of course, we have internal evaluation systems and we have follow-up committees throughout the country. Now they have been consolidated, now they can work for 4 years without any problems. So we have follow-up committees. We removed the evaluation part. We took the evaluation part away. We'd rather, in the name, we'd rather call it follow-up to help. But we still lack a mechanism to measure the social impact, and CISOC will bring us this contribution that we will happily share with all artistic entities, namely with these programs of support and partnership that are somewhat different. Now, as far as this program for arts and territorial cohesion is concerned, it is the latest, and I can already talk about the next is intervention to support artistic projects in the urban, the suburban areas, in peripheral neighborhoods. That's another new partnership project that will be soon announced. But this one on arts and territorial cohesion is a partnership with the Portuguese Auditorium cultural activities. We had asked them to, some years ago, 2 years ago, to develop a cultural atlas of Portugal. We needed that map. I mean, there is very little information available. And the observatory did this, they produced this atlas. Well, actually, they presented it in the form of reports, partial reports, related to the data that they had obtained. And at a certain moment in time, we thought that we could take advantage of this data to create a new support that only low artistic density, artistic cultural density territories could be intervened, meaning that only where it was absolutely necessary. We know that there are parts of Portugal where there are very few professional artistic cultural activities, mainly in the hinterland of Portugal. So the atlas confirmed that, the data provided confirmed that, and we asked the observatory to identify the municipalities with less of artistic activity, so that they could be the ones that would apply to our pledges. And that's what happened. It was a financial line just to the municipalities. We were surprised with the number of applicants, and we took advantage of this occasion to make this program some sort of a laboratory. We introduced differences vis-à-vis the support to the arts. We tested, and since it worked well, now we will extend them to the sustainable support, to projects and other initiatives, and the high focus, yes. And it is very important, the process. notwithstanding the final object, but participation, connection to the community, this is also important. And what it leaves behind in the locally, because then these entities may identify partners, local partners, and create continuity mechanisms. Now, this entails a lot of differences vis-à-vis the very application process. We could send videos as well. You could even make interviews. And so, in a nutshell, I'm going to close. This program must have this and the other ones. There must be a final review made by the observatory, but then we can add CISOC and extend it to the other programs. That's the only way to make sure that we have achieved our goals and correct any weaknesses or mistakes. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, Américo. Peço desculpa por
Thank you, America. I apologize for having to insist on keeping the time. I gave you a few minutes more, but we need to stick to our schedule. We began 10 minutes late. So we were going to have 10 minutes for discussion. I don't know if we have any more time. I'd thank you to identify yourselves.
Tivemos aqui uma mesa composta de
We had a panel
práticas de
with a lot of experiences and practices that talk about working with communities and several audiences. I see someone wanting to ask a question. The microphone will be delivered to you momentarily.
Olá, Denise novamente. Eu estava pouco
It's Denise again. I was a bit weary of asking another question, but since nobody else wants to ask questions, I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Américo.
Não tenho conhecimento profundo sobre
I'm not deeply knowledgeable
concursos da DGARTS, mas eu
about
tomei conhecimento de que no
the
último
tenders launched
ciclo
by DGARTS,
houve
but I've heard that
uma mudança
during the last cycle there was a structural change in the tenders.
No meu entender, na minha leitura, buscava
As far as I can see,
reforçar
the attempt
uma
was to
necessidade das
strengthen
entidades, e eu vejo de uma forma
a
muito
need
positiva
that
essa
entities and bodies
iniciativa.
had.
Então, buscava reforçar um compromisso das entidades com
They want to
contrato
ensure their
mais a longo
commitment
prazo dos
with
seus
these projects and
colaboradores.
include
Trocando
give
em miúdos,
their staff
eu, na
longer
minha
contracts.
leitura, aquilo foi um mecanismo para combater
The way I see it,
a precariedade, que é um mal
the idea was to
terrível
fight
no meio
employment
cultural.
instability, which is
Perguntou do
quite an
Américo,
issue in the cultural sector.
A DGARTS, eu sei que está pouco no início, né? Mas como a DGARTS tem
And I'd
avaliado
like
isso
you
e
to tell
lançar
me
repto,
what assessment
se fazer
DGARTS makes of this.
uma espécie de avaliação, enfim, não sei se isso seria no âmbito da DGARTS, mas avaliação da precariedade na
Yes, and
área
I'd like
cultural.
you to tell me how you assess this initiative. This is a great question. It's true. In the last cycle of sustained support, we wanted to create dignified working conditions, and to that end, in order to reach certain thresholds, the bodies, the organizations needed to have a number of people on staff. And we were pleasantly surprised because we saw that they joined in droves. this can still be improved upon, but all of a sudden we had twice as many people on staff in those bodies.
Também, obviamente, isto obriga que o Ministério da Cultura coloque mais dinheiro.
The Ministry of Culture needs to invest more money into supporting these bodies because there was money geared towards this, and the result was more contracts, people on staff. We had great results, but I think there's still a path to tread in order to fight job insecurity. Internally, we make our own assessment, but we need these actions and these projects to be assessed from the outside, by third parties. Sometimes we contract them, and we'd like someone to do these assessments. The relationship with the regions is also a case study, a successful case study. And this was all under the scope of sustained support. We can talk about the support of projects and partnerships, etc. Any other issues? Questions? I'm sorry. That not being the case, and because we have a very rich program, I'd like to thank José Alberto, Marta, Dália, and Américo, and Aida Alves. And I'd like to thank you all who stuck with us.
Vou falar daqui. Obrigada. Eu queria chamar aqui a atenção para o trabalho que a Valentina e
I'd like to draw your attention for the work that Valentina and Sofia are doing. They're doing interpretation. Please give them a round of applause.
Agora estamos um bocadinho atrasados, vamos passar para a súmula da conferência.
We're a little late. I'll go to the floor, Maria João Lima and Flora Maravilhas, to sum up this conference. I keep losing myself in my notes. Maria João Lima is an integrated researcher at the Center for Research and Studies in Sociology, CISOC, and Flora Maravilhas. She's been here before. She comes to us from the Public Policies Institute. 15 minutes for closing.
Ok. Olá, muito boa tarde a todos.
Good evening, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. As rapporteur ZIS, I'd like to thank Clara Camacho for inviting us. We're tasked with summarizing it. It's always tough to do this. We'd like to do something different. We'd like to switch between Flora and myself. Here we go.
Olá. Hoje foi dia de trabalho intenso e mobilizador do compromisso do impacto social das organizações culturais.
Geared around the social impact
Essa conferência
of cultural organizations.
Essa conferência é, por si só,
This
bom
conference
exemplo
in
de
itself
políticas
is a
públicas.
perfect example of
A
public
apresentação
policies.
de uma medida do Plano Estratégico do
Presented
Plano Nacional das Artes, que resulta de um longo estudo e trabalho,
National Program for
e
the
que,
Arts,
no mesmo momento, é colocada ao escrutínio e à discussão de
the same,
especialistas e agentes do terreno.
at once it's placed before
Inovadora é a
experts.
própria apresentação pública dessa
This
medida.
public presentation of
Primeira
this measure
fase
is
da
innovative
etapa de compromisso, conforme referenciado pela Clara Camacho, no fluxograma do processo de
and this was
construção
shown
do CISOC.
by Clara Camacho in the flowchart of how CISOC is made up. This is a tool to support the strategy of several bodies and the planning and self-assessment of cultural-related organizations, helping identify their needs to help monitor the results. This tool is supposed to be flexible, adjustable to all organizations. CISOC was discussed in detail, several dimensions by experts in several areas of culture.
Iniciou-se com a marcante comunicação.
We launched with groundbreaking communication, measuring the impact in the cultural sector, changes and opportunities in a changing world.
Contextualizou
By
o cenário
Alexander Boll,
internacional em que o CISOC é
he
criado,
drafted the context
designadamente o de
of the creation
reinterpretação
of
do papel das instituições culturais,
CISOC,
que agora
namely
têm
the
uma
role
natureza
of
multidimensional,
cultural
e
institutions
por isso são confrontadas
that
com
are
um leque
multidimensional,
de responsabilidades.
and they have an expanded span of responsibilities. We need to stop working for and we start working with these new responsibilities of cultural bodies arise from the relevance of culture as a way to reach wider social goals. In a setting of international challenges, culture and its organizations must contribute to the solution. And for that, we need to make assessments.
A questão que se coloca é como dar
The
conta
question
dessa
that was
avaliação
raised was
multifacetada,
how
que evidencia os
to have
impactos
this
das organizações
multifaceted
culturais
assessment that
que vão
takes
além dos
into
sociais.
consideration
Medindo
all
os
the
impactos,
social and
significa
economic
compreender
impacts
se e como uma
the
atividade ou um
institutions
projeto
have.
específico podem desempenhar um papel no
How can
processo
you
de
tell
transformação
whether or
de
not a
pessoas,
project
das
can transform
organizações e
people,
da
can
sociedade?
transform organizations and society itself? In the afternoon, we looked at implemented examples, the panel studies and perspectives. Raquel Frank presented the Portuguese scenario. Then we heard about parties, Bruno Seabra, and the monitoring and assessment of Teatro Dona Maria II by Patrícia Silva Santos. And we also talked about hybrid methodology for monitoring and assessing their activities. The following panel, and I'm sorry if I'm breezing through this, we talked about practices and experiences, very diverse ones when it comes to impact, in 5 different bodies, different from one another in everything. We also heard about their expectations, high expectations.
Ressalta-se, no entanto, que o nível de
I'd like to
complexidade
stress
que se
that
quer capturar acompanha a
what
dificuldade
we
dos
want to capture is
métodos que
very
devem ser
complex,
aplicados.
and therefore,
Nesse
so are the
cenário,
methods
espera-se que o
to assess it.
autodiagnóstico, a autoavaliação seja
Self-diagnosis,
caminho,
self-assessment is
como
a
foi dito
possible
pela
path
manhã pela
forward,
equipe do CISOC.
like
E
the
essa
CISOC
opção,
team
ainda que tenha suas
said this
falhas,
morning.
ela valoriza a
The
autonomia e a
assessment has
flexibilidade de
flaws,
cada
but
organização cultural,
it
além de
stresses
ser mais
the
fácil de ser
autonomy
integrada
and
numa
flexibility
cultura
of
de
each organization.
monitoração,
It must
de
be
monitorização e de
included
avaliação na
within the
rotina
scope
das
of
organizações culturais.
routine assessment of cultural organizations. We also discussed high number of quantitative indicators. This seemed to be an issue across the board, and quantitative indicators are essential, that's true, but they must be accompanied by qualitative ones, but the quantitative ones are the only ones that allow us to compare data. Sonia Blasco talked about museum barometer in Catalonia, and she showed that these two indicators can be complementary. We drafted a CISOC kit to help with this indicator issue. Nobody talked about the CISOC site, but it is online. Please look it up. CISOC is a tool that needs constant reassessment and fine-tuning. We talked about this under the social barometer and the parties project. It must be periodically reviewed and fine-tuned based on all the experiences we have. We need to have a common language that is shared inside and outside the sector. CISOC demands political commitment. Thank everyone that was here for their contribution, and thank you for stressing how relevant culture is for social and human development. This is the motto. I'm committed.
No último painel da conferência vai ter lugar agora a apresentação pública da versão portuguesa da publicação of Culture and Local Development,
launch of Culture and Local Development, Maximizing Impact, a guide for local governments, communities and museums, edited by the OECD,
através de esforço conjunto do PNA,
jointly by OECD and ICOM.
Procedeu-se à tradução desta
we translated this very relevant book. It will be available online on their sites. To talk to us about this guide, we have Karen Maguire, head of division of the UCD's Local Employment and Economic Development Program.
Thank you very much. And I know it's the end of the day.
Thank you. Obrigado. Eu sei que ao final do dia vou tentar ser breve. Quantos minutos é que me dão?
Yeah, you tell me. But I can do shorter. Don't worry, we'll do shorter than 20. So it's a great pleasure to be here, and for all of those who stayed the whole day, congratulations. I'd really like to thank the organizers for having us come here. So why is the OECD here? What am I here to talk about? And how is it linked with what you've been talking about all day? Well, the OECD does work on culture and creative sectors. So I don't know if anybody knows that, other than a few people in the room, but now I hope all of you know that. And the reason we work on it is because we feel it is an important driver of local economic and social development. And just as we heard this morning with Alessandro's presentation, the local area is the intersection of all of these ecosystems which culture can play a role in supporting. So this is why a program at the OECD called Local Employment and Economic Development really focuses on these issues. And it's not on the slides, but having listened throughout the day about some of the debates on social impact, on measurement, too many indicators, not enough indicators. I just wanted to flag that, you know, this comes up a lot in the debates that we have at the OECD, especially with those that are working, for example, with the third sector, or what we call the social economy. But we have to keep in mind, just like for culture, that it's about improving or changing somebody's well-being. Or the natural environment, and it's something that we can attribute to the actions that we're taking in our institutions. So I think, you know, while the debates about is it too burdensome, How do I manage these impact indicators, et cetera? I think if the mindset is about how can I see what these indicators can do to help me managing a cultural organization, managing a third sector organization, how can they help me better create value and improve my mission? And if the orientation is on that, and it's also a tool for increasing participation and engagement, then it can be a win-win. So regardless of where you are on this spectrum, I think we can all agree that that's an issue and that the challenges that were raised throughout the day on this external pressure to standardize the indicators, the hurdles for measurement, and potentially the unintended consequences, but we can still all agree it's something we should strive to do. So I look forward to reviewing and sharing with other OECD countries the new tool that was launched here today. So, the OECD on culture. Our main incentive in our work is to help make sure that that visibility of culture, because we heard about visibility, one of the key drivers of wanting to document impact, that is seen by all the other ministries, because culture ministries know that this is important. But they also need the tools and the evidence to convince the employment ministries, the innovation ministries, territorial cohesion ministries, that culture is important for their portfolios as well. And the more that people all recognize in their policy fields that it's important, the easier it is for them to adapt their policies to be relevant. We heard a question earlier about employment security of artists, for example. Well, that means that our employment policies, our social protection policies need to think about the special issues associated with cultural workers. So the OECD work really goes into these issues in addition to, of course, at the OECD data. So if you're interested, I wear a red jacket to be easy to find afterwards. I can share with you all sorts of different things that we do to support the role of culture and creative sectors in national, regional, local economies, whether it's studies of particular places, whether it's thematic reports, whether it's convincing and working with the G20 so that G20 leaders in their leader statements the last few years have actually been talking about culture. So the more that we get this on these big radar screens, the more people will be paying attention to the important work that you're doing in cultural organizations. Also standard setting and toolkits and guides, and we're going to focus on the guide that's now in Portuguese here, the OECD ICOM guide, focusing on museums and local development. And I should also flag, if anyone is interested, we have summer schools on these issues, and the last one was focusing on the role of artificial intelligence in culture and creative sectors. So lots of different activities. So we're here to celebrate, in a sense, and launch this guide that I mentioned. And this guide was developed as a practical tool for museums and for local governments. And it was used a process similar to what we heard with Barcelona, pilot tests. And we're very pleased to thank the City of Lisbon, the Museum of Lisbon, and Margarita is here. It's nice to meet you. I joined after, but she worked very hard on this case study. And so we had case studies that helped us develop this guide. And so, of course, Joana Monteiro was very instrumental in helping not only to make sure that Lisbon gets visibility for the actions that the Museum of Lisbon does, but also that you now have, with support from others, a guide in Portuguese language that can be used in any of your communities. And it already exists in many languages, as you see on the screen, from Polish to Korean to Italian, etc. Soon Japan, Greek, Latvian, all sorts of places. So what this guide is not is actually an impact assessment tool. So even if that was the focus of the day, this guide is really about how can we help achieve those great positive social impacts that we talked about today, measuring. So that's what this guide is all about. In the interest of time, I will just do a brief overview of the guide, but you can find it and go into a lot more detail when you're maybe not hungry for dinner. So, so the guide has some different themes. Many regroup some of the same topics we heard also earlier in the day, for example, with the barometer in Barcelona, but the guide really focuses on how can museums help local economic development? How can museums help with urban regeneration and communities, as we heard some examples earlier in the panels? How can they help with culturally aware and creative societies? How can they be places of inclusion and well-being? And how can we think of museums as a mainstream part of local development? So what I will do is just let you know a few of the different topics that are in the guide, and then you can look in more detail. But just to give you an example, a lot of the traditional local economic development impacts are highlighted in terms of jobs, revenues, tourist attraction, attractiveness for talent and other firms, but also this dissemination of new technologies and creation of new goods and services. And so the guide gives examples of types of actions that both local governments and museums can take. And just to give you an example from, the case study of Lisbon, where there are all sorts of objects made by local designers inspired by the collections in the museum. A question and answer game about the city of Lisbon that was developed, which I'm going to buy tomorrow morning for my family. Links with local universities. All sorts of interesting activities that have a strong economic development link. And then one area that was raised in the study was perhaps how could more be done on the sort of links with tourism. A second area is on the role in community development, whether it's helping with international branding, economic diversification, better quality of life, social capital, all the things we heard about earlier throughout the day. So different recommendations on how museums can be part of the reflections on urban planning, how they're spaces of public debates, how they're anchors in communities, and what are the kinds of proactive approaches that museums can take in that space. And so one example from the case of Lisbon on St. Anthony's thrones, where they provide the thrones so that people will come to the museum, and then they can help rekindle and revive a tradition within the local community. So a third area is on culturally aware and creative societies, thinking about how we help people with knowledge, with skills, with openness, with creativity. A lot of the areas that you work on yourselves day in and day out. So the guide, of course, has different examples of what are the ways that both local governments and museums can recognize this role, and in particular, making sure that there is that balance between what is done for tourists and what is done for people locally. They have that sense of ownership. I think we heard in one of the panels, I've lived next to that museum, but I didn't think it was for me. So that's what some of the guide tries to give practical guidance for. And of course, there are lots of activities in the Museum of Lisbon in our case study, whether with 39 different cultural facilities engaging in different forms of programs for young people, students, teachers, or even programs to help support those for example, with a mental disability of some form. And so there's lots of opportunities, and one that is here, but lots of other museums could have a more active role in continued lifelong learning of adults, because often there's a strong link on the school systems and perhaps not as much on the older groups. In the middle, and then you see a lot more activity in museums with seniors. The fourth category on just spaces for inclusion, health and well-being, and different areas that can be done here. And I think this is where there's a lot of innovative research. Now, the OECD isn't doing this research, but others where you can literally test saliva before you go into a museum and after you come out and see that your stress levels have gone down. So all sorts of exciting areas on health that we can explore, and different ways that museums and local governments can really think about museums as a tool for this, whether it's pathways to employment or whether it's thinking about physical and mental health. And of course, lots of activities in many different museums, and here, for example, initiatives to support discussions about maternity or the postpartum phase, and opportunities, for example, in Lisbon for maybe perhaps more of these assessment studies just to demonstrate the value, again, this issue of visibility. And the last element of the guide is really how can we mainstream the role of museums in local development. And, you know, it can be as these knowledge hubs, it can be as a supplier of space for interaction among stakeholders. It can really be a forum where also management frameworks can help in guiding how museums are managed and supporting local development. So the guide has different suggestions on ways to think about it beyond ad hoc projects, how to really think about museums as embedded local partners in the local development strategies. And we found in the example from Lisbon that actually the city is very strong in recognizing its role as a local driver and opportunities to even do more. So I think there's really quite a lot to do, even if this guide was developed before COVID hit. I think the principles are still the same. We see countries wanting to continue to use it and to build on it. And so a huge thanks again to all here in Portugal who helped make this case study happen, who helped get the guide into Portuguese for you. And again, don't hesitate to come up to me if you would like to learn more about other work that we're doing that could support your different objectives in the cultural space. So thank you so much for having me join you.
Thank you, Karen, for your wisdom and your sharpness in time also. Thank you so much. E vamos então agora para o encerramento institucional dos organizadores, primeiro apresento os organizadores da conferência, pelo OPAC José Soares Neves, subcomissária do PNA Sara Brigenti, dos parceiros, diretora do Museu de Lisboa, Joana Sousa Monteiro, subdiretora-geral da DGPC Rita Jerónimo, e David Felizmino, Presidente do ICOM Portugal. Muito obrigada. Eu já disse palavras do que... Desculpa, estou ligada.
Eu encerro. Eu penso Esta mesa está organizada de tal forma...
Começa a Joana.
do lado esquerdo.
Aqui a ordem do encerramento. Aqui Joana, Rita Jerónimo, David Felizmino, José Soares Neves, Sara Briganti e depois a videomensagem do Ministro João Costa.
Eu não sei muito bem o que é que vou dizer, porque já foi tudo muito explicado, nomeadamente pelas relatoras, do mais importante.
So well explained by the rapporteurs. So, and then this Karen McQuarrie's communication was so important, the closing of a cycle that took some time to come to an end. And this, today the most important is CISOC, but the guide of OECD in Portuguese is extremely important as well. Museum of Lisbon, EGEAC, the municipality, together with the PNA, the GPC, Clara, we will certainly communicate the uses, the more specific uses for the Portuguese museums of this OECD guide. But we will explain that later to the museums. It will certainly be much easier now. So let me just again stress, and connecting with what was said in the morning, the authors of CISOC, the authors or the organizers of this conference, with all these stakeholders, institutional stakeholders, but also because it is your passion and devotion, a joint reflection about what this tool is, what it can be in the future, and how it can be changed, and so many other questions that came up because of CISOC, even though not necessarily directly related to this instrument. So it was an extremely rich day, not just interesting, but it's surprising even. It brought us reflections, multidisciplinary, complementary reflections, but also some more issues. That's what we are here for, more problems. We are here not just to implement things, but to deal with problems that are found around these systems that CISOC is related to. Thank you, PNA, thank you, DGPC, thank you, Observatory, and thank you, Clara. And thank you, ICOM. Good afternoon to the members of the panel in this institutional closing session. It's always rather solemn occasion. I'd like to celebrate the National Fund for the Arts, the Observatory of Cultural Activities, and all the other partners that were involved in the development of this important tool. And I would also like to thank in public and congratulate Clara Camacho, because we all know how difficult it is to bring about these collective projects that take time and involve many partners. So congratulations, Clara, for coordinating this team, and after 2 years we were able to complete this important work. Without further ado, let me just stress 3 points at the end of the day, 3 notes. First, I congratulate, we are very happy for this new capacity building tool that will support cultural professionals in general and museum professionals in particular. And we know that these tools are scarce in Portugal, namely in museums. This tool, and that is the second note I would like to make, given the challenges society puts to the survival of cultural institutions in general, and museums and the heritage in particular. I'm talking about ICOM. And so quoting the title of this project and the conference, and although we were always with the people at the center of cultural organizations, allow me to replace them or to bring them back to the center of the organizations in this afternoon, because what we are talking about is more or less abstract concepts, creative agents, participants, audiences, communities, society. But in reality, 60 or 70 years ago, the society is questioning our relevance on a day-to-day basis. So the challenge of inclusion, diversity of the audiences, diversification of audiences, sharing authority and power, all that are pressures from society. And that is why today is so important. This tool is so important. And back to what was said before by Dalia, we have to change our mindset. We have to change the positioning of cultural institutions and most museums in a national context about what is a true social commitment, a true social deal, and a true social role. And the third note then is something that was mentioned several times throughout today. I would not want to leave it out. It's the collaboration, networking, and in partnership, working in partnership. Everything that I just mentioned, and that were discussed during the day, diversification of audiences, inclusion, co-participation, all this requires tools, methodologies, languages, and this has to do with capacity building of professionals. So on an ongoing basis. So in addition to breaking with the model of an institution that does not work with the local communities, and not just to the communities, we have to break with the idea of an isolated institution that only works to the ministry, creating partnerships of only with partnerships can we achieve our goals. So this third aspect is very important, collaborative work. And that's it. Thank you.
Então, muito boa tarde a todas e a todos e cumprimento aqui os meus companheiros de mesa. Muito rapidamente, o dia já veio longo.
Well, this has been a long day, so on behalf of the Director General for Cultural Heritage, I'd like to thank the National Plan for the Arts for having brought us this magnificent tool, and this was the motive for an important and inspiring reflection during the day. As we all know, the National Plan for the Arts has been a shining star with a relevant role in its mission to connect public policies that relate culture to education, and it's crucial in both areas. We talked about cultural democracy, work with instead of working for, and all these are aspects that bring us a new view of our work, our actions. And in reality, CISOC is the result of that attitude, of this perspective. And this work shows, well, we should not be running after the targets, but we have to set targets that make sense to what our principles are. And that's what I felt here today, and that I feel in the museums and the DGPC. So this work, work was being already developed, and there are plenty of projects, and CISOC now will allow us to become aware. We can now pause and think about what we are doing, where we want to go, and this is extremely important and crucial, because sometimes our work does not allow us to do that. Just pause, look, see what are we doing correctly, what are we doing incorrectly, if we are achieving our, attaining our targets, not just with the people that work with us at museums, but also impact it has on the communities and all those that are involved one way or another in the work of the museums. Now that we are there in a time of change, a personal time of change, thank Mr. Camacho. It was Clara Camacho. It was great to work with Clara Camacho during these years. She is very good at the use of strategic tools. She has been involved with tools that are fundamental to the work of our institution. So allow me to show my gratitude to Clara for all her work, and GPC from the first moment joined this project, and because, but again, people that are behind, it's what matters. And here we have Clara, and so although this is an institutional closing, I wanted to give this personal note of thanks. And I also thank Clara for the creation and development of this tool that was so much praised already, and for this excellent day, the organization of this event, the inspiring projects that we came to know, and the articulation between what has been done by the different institutions, partnerships. I think this was a key moment for us to become aware of that importance, this more holistic and encompassing view about the work we do, and that has so much to do in many aspects. We talked about commitments, responsibility, transparency, planning, transforming potential, belonging. All these are things that our organizations, of course, value and promote. And so thank you for this tool, thank you for your work, thank you for today, the very inspiring day. Thank you.
Muito boa tarde a todas e a todos. Cumprimento também os membros da mesa. O meu registro vai ser um pouco diferente, já vão ver. Mas quero começar por dar os parabéns ao Plano Nacional das Artes pela criação do CISOC, por todo o trabalho, já tem sido referido, mas agora mais especificamente pela criação do CISOC, e agradecer também pelo desafio para a coorganização desta conferência. Para além de tudo o que já foi dito, tem sido também, penso, um importante momento de encontro, reencontro, mas em grande medida até reencontro. E digamos que permite ultrapassar algumas segmentações que de alguma forma nos vamos habituando. Ou somos só investigadores, ou somos só profissionais, ou somos só dos museus, ou somos só das artes, e isso permitiu, penso, um diálogo muito profícuo a propósito das intervenções, mas também com os vários participantes. Depois, um gosto pessoal pela colaboração com a equipa do PNA, com a Amélia Fernandes, com a Flora e, claro, com a coordenadora Clara Camacho, nesta nova luta comum, já são várias, agora na construção do kit CISOC. Uma grande satisfação por parte do OPAC na co-coordenação desta conferência com o PNA, extensiva aos nossos parceiros, ao ICOM,
I'd like to thank ICOM, the Museum of Lisbon, a GPC, David Felizmin, Joana Sousa Monteiro, Rita Jerónimo, etc.
Faço alguns breves agradecimentos.
Some more thanks.
Começo por agradecer o
conferência
pelo Iscte,
Iscte for housing us here.
Serviços do Iscte envolvidos por toda a colaboração e apoio, e em especial à equipa da missão do apoio técnico e informático,
for their support, the IT people. I'd like to thank them for the sound and light. I'd like to thank the event staff, Patricia Santos. I'd like to thank them for finding the right solutions for this event. I'd like to thank the communication teams at Iscte. I'd like to thank Hugo Cruz, our photographer. I don't know if he's still around, but I'm sure we'll have full coverage of this conference. I'd furthermore like to thank the OPAC team, George Santos for coming up with the IT tool for the indicators, FIA Macedo, at the first panel, Maria João Lima, who summarized the content as well as Flora Maravilhas, and I'd like to thank for the way all the teams worked together. This was no easy feat to accomplish. I'd like to thank all those who participated, moderators, the audience. I'd like to thank you for your interest in the people, the social impact of cultural organizations.
Bem, já está. Bem, isto já estamos mesmo num longo dia e
this has been a very long day. I'm very happy to have this final word.
Mas, enquanto elemento do Plano Nacional das Artes,
as a member of the National Plan for the Arts,
cumprimentar-vos a todos
I'd
vocês,
like to greet all of you
muito especial a cada de vocês, porque
and thank each and every one of you, because I managed to see every single one of you. If not myself, then someone from the National Plan for the Arts. Surely talk to you. And
observações finais enquanto sede deste instrumento que hoje aqui se apresentou.
The plan is the headquarters
tem cerca de 4
for
anos e
this
meio.
program. The plan is 4.5 years old. When it came about, the idea, it had a conceptual vision. And the idea was to look at the constitutional rights linked to cultural rights,
apoiar a sua
and also
implementação
to
ao nível
support their
de apoiar a
implementation,
criação, mas também
support creation, but also participation in culture.
E ampliar o acesso de
We want to
todos
broaden
às
everyone's
expressões
access
artísticas e culturais
to artistic and cultural
presentes já no nosso
expressions.
país. E com esta visão fomos pensando num plano estratégico.
With this
que
vision,
começou
we thought about a
desenhar em
strategic
3
plan
eixos.
around
dos
3
eixos
axes.
que costumamos dizer que é o coração do plano.
One of the axes is the heart of the plan. It has to do with access and education.
Trabalho, isto depois, no fundo, informou todo trabalho muito aturado com as escolas e com as comunidades educativas.
And this involved a lot of work with school and other educational communities. We also had an informal approach, and we widened this to all institutions that are charged with the artistic education of everyone. We quickly realized that we needed to draft, we need to have an axis devoted to the training of technical staff, professors, cultural mediators, professors, teachers, and
dos próprios dirigentes, de que forma é que podemos pensar em metodologias, ferramentas,
how can we think of methodologies and tools, ways to support continuous training of these cultural agents. We all are cultural agents when you look at it. We are all cultural agents because we're all part of this culture.
E percebemos também que não poderíamos deixar de
And
fora
we realized that we could not leave out the cultural policies aspect. And this is where we'll fit structuring measures, strategic plans, municipal plans, culture, education. And we've had many reflections on this by our colleague Manuel Gama, and many other people helped draft many measures. And we're talking about the social impact of cultural organizations. We thought about how art and culture can see their impact on society in a way that could be more palpable, or that help somehow plan or strengthen their impact. I would like to leave
Falámos aqui
a
muito
note.
de avaliação hoje, como era de se esperar, e estamos
We
na
talked
casa da
about
avaliação.
assessment,
Mas, na verdade,
and this
para
is
o plano,
an
esta
evaluation. This is
medida é uma medida de
one such
intencionalidade
house,
estratégica, de
but this is
planeamento,
strategically very
e, sobretudo,
important. We
também
need
de
this for planning and we need this for capacity building.
Tudo isto tem sido feito
All
no
of
plano
this
de acordo com aquilo que o Paulo
has
fala
been
sempre
done
como uma forma,
according to what
estilo
Paulo
próprio do Plano Nacional das Artes.
mentioned
Na
as
verdade, é um estilo próprio
the
de
style
cada
of
de
the
nós, e esse estilo é o da democracia
NPA, and I'm
E,
talking about cultural
assinalar
democracy.
durante estes 2
And I'd
anos,
like to
com
stress
esta
that
equipa
over these 2 years,
fomos acompanhando
with
o
the team
trabalho, que nos foi
whose
sendo
work we
apresentado,
monitored,
tivemos sempre este
and they
cuidado de colocar
presented their work
as pessoas no centro
to us every
e
step of the way, and we thought people should be at the center of this, and
se hoje estamos aqui todos nesta
cultural
plateia,
democracy
de alguma
should
maneira,
be the
todos
target.
interligados, também por via do plano.
We want them all to be linked
O plano está a
with the
trabalhar
plan,
sempre com as pessoas e não
and if we achieve this is because the plan works with people and not from the top down. The plan works in the field with each and every one of you. And if this tool does something, it's not just assess, self-assess.
Não é só para, no fundo, também, porque pode também ter esse outro lado menos positivo de quase ser uma autocensura, porque se eu vou olhar
This tool can also include self-censorship. If I look at the indicators and see what I haven't done or what I haven't been able to achieve, this could be a negative outlook. But no, we want this tool to help build, to look forward and help us think of means, resources, and ways to arrive where we want to arrive. And now let me get something from the glossary of the National Plan for the Arts. This longing, the desire to arrive somewhere. If we don't long for a goal, then we won't be able to change anything. Unless this tool is a tool that calls upon institutions to become institutions. It's a tool to institutionalize. And it can only happen if it's echoed by your passion to use it, and to use it according to its goals, its context, and the way it's meant to be used. The plan will be in force for a number of years, for another 6 years. We've learned a lot from you. And this tool will be yet another tool in a whole portfolio of tools that are useful because you tell us that these are the tools you need to institutionalize, to look outside the institutions and work with people in a people-focused culture. If CISOC can do something, it's because you want it to happen, because you use it, and because you ask us to support you. Clara said, when she presented the tool, said the next steps are training people to use this tool. This is key. I'd like to stress that this is already available online on our website, cisoc.pna.gov.pt. You can download all of it or each part. You could download the Excel tool linked to the CISOC. And very soon, we'll, as per your request, we'll come to you and organize training so that you can better use this tool.
Tenho mesmo que acrescentar alguns agradecimentos àqueles que já foram aqui feitos e para além desta
I'd like to thank this amazing and smart, agile team, the team that was able to reinvent itself. This was 2 years of non-stop work. We were constantly under review. We kept improving on our own work. How can we be more flexible? It wasn't easy. Getting here wasn't easy. This is a time to celebrate the team that we have. In my thanks, I'd like to thank Iscte and the whole team that was with us every step of the way. I'd like to thank the GPC, represented by Rita Jerónimo and Isabel Melo, who took such great care of this conference. Arte Central, who was with us. These were very intensive months. They helped us prepare this website, and I'm thinking specifically of Marta Ornelas. I'd like to thank the National Plans for the Arts team. They brought our call to the whole country, and we're working with more than 70% of the municipality, more than 70% of the schools. And this gives you an idea of how broad-ranging this is, how ambitious this is for us. And we did the plan, Fernando, João, Susana, Maria João, and other colleagues who were backstage and helped us put this together. The GEST team were with us always in streaming. I'd like to thank CISOC Design. Ana do Canto, she works with us. Image is key. I think she brought us a very good graphic image for CISOC. And I'd like to thank all who were part of the test, all the speakers, Lígia Afonso, who kept us in line, Maria Assis, the chairman of the Monitoring Council of the National Plan for the Arts. He keeps demanding more and more and more. And again, I'd like to thank all of you who stayed with us throughout the day and who helped us fine-tune, who will help us fine-tune CISOC, this tool that we thought out very well. And I'd like to thank Clara Camacho. She's an inspiration. She's a great teacher. Clara, thank you for being so involved with us, with this tool. This is a postdoc.
E agora? E então agora vou dar a dica ao Fernando para passar o vídeo do Sr. Ministro da Educação, João Costa, que não quis nos deixar uma mensagem.
The Minister of Education, João Costa, wanted to leave us with a parting note.
Muito boa tarde a todos. Apesar de estar à distância, é um gosto acompanhar o encerramento desta importante conferência e agradeço ao Plano Nacional das Artes por mais uma vez nos estar a criar uma oportunidade de reflexão conjunta sobre o papel da arte das nossas vidas, o papel da arte na nossa sociedade e, sobretudo, no contexto específico da educação, o papel da arte na formação e educação das crianças e dos jovens. Gostava de fazer um pouco de história para percebermos exatamente porque é que o Plano Nacional das Artes foi criado, de que forma é que tem estado a cumprir a sua missão e de que forma queremos que continue este enorme trabalho que tem vindo a fazer. Quando criámos, há cerca de 5 anos, quando concebemos o Plano Nacional das Artes enquanto política pública, esta criação do plano decorreu de vários diagnósticos da importância que o Ministério da Cultura tem dado ao reforço da democratização da arte, do acesso de todos à arte, e nós sabemos que a escola é um instrumento fundamental para garantir acesso àqueles que não têm acesso a determinados bens, a determinados serviços públicos, a determinadas formas de expressão, mas não era apenas isso que estava em causa. Tínhamos recentemente aprovado o perfil dos alunos à saída da escolaridade obrigatória, que é o nosso documento base do nosso currículo, no qual inscrevemos nas competências a desenvolver ao longo dos 12 anos de escolaridade uma particular, a sensibilidade estética e artística. E o que é que isto significa? Isto significa que quando passamos pela escola, nós aprendemos e desenvolvemos a capacidade de ler, desenvolvemos literacia matemática, literacia científica, aprendemos geografia, aprendemos história, mas se deixarmos a arte de fora, não temos uma formação completa. Portanto, este é um primeiro impacto social do nosso Plano Nacional das Artes, é percebermos que a arte faz parte das nossas vidas, que nós só somos unicamente humanos e autenticamente humanos se também aprendermos esta capacidade e desenvolvermos esta competência de nos maravilharmos com o que é belo, de nos interrogarmos perante as diferentes formas de expressão artística e de podermos entender que é através da arte que nós acedemos a níveis mais complexos de entendimento, que acedemos àquela que é a grande necessidade num mundo fortemente digitalizado, em que a inteligência artificial se torna também generativa, para conseguirmos não perder esta capacidade fundamental que é a capacidade criativa. A criatividade é uma competência cada vez mais valorizada e é uma competência que é sobretudo trabalhada através da educação artística. Queríamos também, e temos esta percepção muito clara nos objetivos do Plano Nacional das Artes e nos impactos que esperamos em termos sociais do Plano Nacional das Artes, nós sabemos, e ainda ontem os resultados do PISA voltam a mostrar isso de uma forma global, mas muito particularmente em Portugal, nós sabemos que as condições socioeconómicas das famílias são ainda o que mais prediz, o mais forte preditor do sucesso ou do insucesso escolar. E quando também sabemos que se associa à condição socioeconómica o acesso e a capacidade de usufruir da arte nas mais variadas expressões. As condições desiguais para a aprendizagem têm impactos muito grandes e um deles, que também é referido no relatório PISA, é esta capacidade de nos sentirmos bem na escola, quando estamos a aprender, como condição para se aprender melhor. Ou seja, o desenvolvimento de competências sociais, de competências emocionais, de competências relacionais é absolutamente fundamental para que cada aluno se sinta incluído na comunidade escolar em que está e que esteja mais predisposto para aprender. Ora, para muitas crianças e jovens, a experiência artística é, muitas vezes, a primeira experiência de sucesso. É a oportunidade para estarem mais calmos, para verem o mundo de outra forma e sentirem que é possível estar bem num contexto que lhes é estranho. E por isso a arte tem também, e o nosso Plano Nacional das Artes tem este potencial de ser um contributo muito grande para os objetivos de uma educação cada vez mais inclusiva. E tínhamos ainda um terceiro objetivo em termos de impacto. Nós sabemos que vivemos um período em que a desinformação abunda, em que os radicalismos e os populismos emergem cada vez mais rapidamente, em que se reduz a uma frase simples, um problema complexo, e a escola é este lugar de trabalhar a complexidade. E é também o lugar onde nós podemos e devemos e temos o dever cívico e ético de sensibilizar os jovens para olhar para o outro como um igual, para compreender os problemas do mundo de uma forma integrada, de ganharem a capacidade de discutir e debater, em suma, de serem cidadãos ativos, porque são esclarecidos e informados. E são muitas as vezes em que nós, digamos que despertamos para um tema, que compreendemos melhor o lugar do outro, quando vemos um filme, quando lemos um poema, quando vemos uma peça de teatro. E por isso o nosso Plano Nacional das Artes também tem este impacto social. Despertar-nos, acordar-nos, que é uma coisa que a arte faz, é não nos deixar estar adormecidos, para sermos e construirmos uma melhor cidadania, uma sociedade que é, em primeiro lugar, comunidade, onde todos participam, onde todos contam, onde todos fazem falta. Por isso, ao Plano Nacional das Artes e a todos os participantes nesta conferência, o meu agradecimento profundo por estarmos a cumprir estes objetivos e, no caso concreto da educação, muito obrigado às várias centenas de escolas que em muito pouco tempo aderiram ao Plano Nacional das Artes e conseguem que se faça arte e programação cultural nas escolas.